Good evening, dear students. A very warm welcome to all of you to today's session for the auditing and assurance subject. Hoping that you all have understood chapter number 7, which was on audit sampling. So with a very positive note, we'll be starting with chapter number 8. The name of the chapter is Analytical Procedures. And students, for this chapter, we have been allotted one session. So we need to finish this chapter today itself. Before starting the session, I would like to tell you that I have already uploaded the questions, all the questions and answers like descriptive questions, MCQs, case scenario, and the answer with respect to this chapter. So you can go through those questions, and if time will permit, we will definitely go through all these questions. Okay? So I can see Meghna, Sonika, Karthik, Bhartwaj, Pooja, Annie, Hitesh. These students have already joined. So let us start with chapter number 8, which is analytical procedures. Okay? So students, you all have heard about analytical procedures earlier also. Tell me, in which chapter have you heard about the concept, the term analytical procedures? In which chapter? So when you were doing chapter number 3, right, and you understood the concept of substantive procedures, one of the type of substantive procedure that was discussed with you is what? Analytical procedures, right? And at that time, you must have been told that this topic will be covered in another chapter. So chapter number 8 covers the concept, the essay related to analytical procedures. So Karthik, Hitesh, Sudhanshu, they are saying that, ma'am, in chapter number 3, we have done this concept, right? So students, let me just tell you where exactly you read about analytical procedures. So you, in chapter number 3, you understood the concept of audit procedures, whereby you saw that under SA 315, auditor performs what? Risk assessment procedures. In response to the assessed risk, auditor performs other procedure in under SA 330. So what is the name of SA 315? Identifying and assessing the risk of material misstatement through understanding the entity and its environment. And what is SA 330? The auditor's responses to assessed risk. And how does an auditor respond? By performing other procedures or further audit procedure. And further audit procedures can further be divided as test of controls and substantive procedures. And you must have also done that substantive procedures can further be classified as test of details, which includes vouching and verification and analytical procedures. And just a minute. And analytical procedures. Okay? So today we'll be doing each and everything about analytical procedure. And what is the essay number? SA 520 is there. The name of the essay is what? Analytical procedures itself. And essay 520 contains the responsibility of an auditor with respect to applying the audit procedure, which is what? Analytical procedure, the scope, the objective, and various techniques that the auditor can apply when he is using what? Analytical procedures. Okay? So many of you are correct that, ma'am, SA 530 deals with Gehani is saying, ma'am, SA 520 deals with analytical procedures. Okay? Now, let us try to understand one concept. See, let's say we are conducting the audit of ABC Limited, and the company has paid 50,000 per month as rent for a premises which it has taken on rent. Okay? So one way of checking these payments, these rent payments, is what? The auditor might pick up all the rent payment vouchers and he may go through all of them, and the rent agreement, the bank statements Everything can be checked in detail. Correct? So this is what the routine checking that the auditor can perform in order to check whether these payments of 50,000 per month, which are getting reflected in the P&L, whether these are correct or not, right? Now take another situation. This was case A. Okay? So the auditor, when he had to verify the payment of 50,000, he looked at all these, he inspected all these documents, right? Now take another situation, case B, whereby when the auditor had to check 50,000 per month rent payment, what he did is he analyzed as to what other companies in similar industry operating in similar area are paying, what other companies in similar industry operating in similar area are paying for the similar premises. And he found out that the other companies are paying rupees 10,000 per month with respect to a same premises which is situated in a similar area. Now, this is something unusual. Now, from 50,000 to 10,000, this is something unusual. Quickly tell me, I need your quick answers. Is identification of this something unusual, which is what? That the other companies are paying rupees 10,000 only for a similar premises in a similar area. Was that identification possible in case quickly, a yes or no? See, in case A, auditor performed the entire checking, detailed checking. He performed a test of details. Or I can say he performed the routine checking, that is the rent agreement, the bank statements, the payment vouchers, each and everything. And he found that 50,000 per month has been paid for a period of 12 months. So it is getting correctly reflected in the financial statement in the P&L account. Vis-a-vis the second situation whereby the auditor, he went through the rent agreement also, but along with that, he compared the rent which has been paid by the client and the rent which has been paid by the companies in the similar area for the similar premises, and he found something unusual. So in case of case A, the situation case A, this identification of something unusual won't have been possible now, because auditor would have felt कि ठीक है 50,000 के अकॉर्डिंग पे करना था, 12 months के लिए पे किया, the rent agreement is absolutely correct, the payments are getting reflected in the bank statement, so this is absolutely correct, right? But in case B, since he is comparing the data with the industry, what other players in the similar area are paying for a similar premises, he found something unusual. So when the auditor is comparing the rent which has been paid by the client with the rent which has been paid by other companies in the similar industry for similar area, he is doing what? He is performing one of the analytical procedures. He's performing one of the analytical procedures. So can I say that by routine checkings, all mistakes, all manipulations cannot be identified? By routine checking, all, I'm not saying any mistake, misstatement or mistake, all mistakes or all misstatements cannot be identified. So auditor will have to perform analytical procedures also. So when the auditor is performing routine checking, this is what? Test of details, vouching and verification, right? And here the auditor is doing what? Analytical procedures. Auditor may perform only test of details or only analytical procedures or a combination of both, depending upon his professional judgment with respect to various factors that we'll be discussing just in the second half of this session. Okay? So auditor, see, this to you know na, that auditor will have to perform substantive procedures. Ab usme se whether to perform test of details, whether to perform test of details or analytical procedures or both will depend upon what auditor's professional judgment and the circumstances of the audit, the situation of the client. Okay? So this is just a small example whereby we have understood that analytical procedure, whereby it includes what comparison of data, so how it actually works. Okay? Analytical procedure. Let's take another example. When the auditor started the audit of the, let's say, a company which is manufacturing toys, okay, auditor found that, okay, the GP ratio of the other companies in the similar industry, in the toy manufacturing industry, the other companies are earning between, the GP ratio is between 12 to 14%. Now, auditor develops an expectation that for my client also, the GP ratio should be somewhere between it. So what is auditor doing? Ratio analysis. So this is again what? One of the analytical procedures. Okay? Have you understood? Quickly send in your reply. See, why will an auditor, in case B, why will an auditor, he will see as to what the other companies in the similar area are paying. See, he'll apply his professional judgment. Na? If he feels that the company is paying 50,000, but according to his professional judgment, according to his understanding of the client organization, which he has obtained under SA 315, when he was identifying and assessing the risk of material misstatement through understanding the entity and its environment, auditor might feel that, I need to check it. So he'll apply his professional judgment. Na? Okay, Pooja, is it clear? Okay. So this is a brief idea about what is analytical procedure, whereby we discussed about ratio analysis, we discussed about some comparisons. Okay. Now, and you have also understood that from where have we obtained that auditor needs to perform analytical procedures. So basically, SA 330 says that auditor needs to perform test of controls and substantive procedures. And when the auditor is performing substantive procedures, you all have done this in chapter number 3, he may perform test of details or analytical procedures. Now, how to perform analytical procedure is given where? In SA 520. समझ आता है? तो SA 330 says कि substantive procedures may include analytical procedures. And how to perform analytical procedures? What are the responsibilities of the auditor, the scope, the objective, the techniques? All that is contained in SA 520. ठीक है? So students, we will be discussing more and more examples, and I'm sure that this concept is going to be very clear to you. Consider it as simple as performing ratio analysis, comparing the company's data with the industry data. Okay? And with the further explanation, this concept is going to be very much clear to you. Now, first of all, let's see what is actually meant by analytical procedure. And as I always say, just divide the concept into the parts. So this is what analytical and procedure. So I've written the dictionary meaning of both the words. So what is meant by analytical? These are what the dictionary meanings, not to be learned as such, but for your understanding. So relating to or using analysis or logical reasoning. Okay? So in our example, what did auditor do? He analyzed. He logically thought that, see, if other companies in the similar area are paying only 10,000, then why my client is showing 50,000 per month? Is there an intention to suppress the profits? Hana? So it's logical. He is thinking logically. He's giving a logical reasoning. He's analyzing the data. And what is meant by procedures? The series of action conducted in certain order. So when he is, in our example relating to rent, so a series of action. Okay? He'll ask the management, what is the rent that you are paying? Okay, 50,000. Okay? He will take the similar kind of data from the industry. from the other companies, or he may ask the management, you help me in getting that data. So this is the series of action. Then he'll compare both. Okay? He'll analyze. Okay? And he'll again discuss with the management in case of any inconsistency is there. Okay? Now, in order to understand the definition of analytical procedure, let us first try to understand this example. Suppose our company, the client for which we are conducting the audit, it has shown salary expense of, let's say, rupees 10 lakhs in its P&L account. Okay? And the auditor has to evaluate this information. So I can say auditor will evaluate this financial information. This is a financial information. Na? It is mentioned in rupees. So this is a financial information. So auditor will evaluate the financial information. Okay? Now, when the auditor is evaluating this information, so see, one way of routine checking is what? Auditor will pick up the salary register. Abhi I'm talking about routine checking, test of details, not about your analytical procedure. Auditor may pick up the salary register, he may pick up the bank statements, he may check the TDS and everything in detail. Okay? Let's say in this situation, auditor is simply performing what? Analytical procedure. So he asks the management that, management, tell me, you have shown a salary of rupees 10 lakh in your P&L. Please tell me what is the salary per employee and give me the number of employees that are working in your organization. Okay? So auditor asks for salary per employee and the number of employees that are working in the organization, and he found that 10,000 is the salary per employee. This is rupees, and 100 is the number of employees. And he saw that 10 lakhs is coming and 10 lakhs has been appropriately shown in the P&L account. So this is fair enough. This is reasonable. I need not check he applying his professional judgment based on risk of material misstatement, his assessment of risk of material misstatement. He may apply analytical procedure like this, and he may decide that I won't check this in detail now, or I may check some of the salary entries on a sample basis. Rest I have applied analytical procedure. Okay? So what auditor is doing here, he is evaluating the financial information. What is the financial information in our case? Salary of rupees 10 lakh, which has been reflected in the P&L. How? He's studying the relationship between salary per employee. This is in rupees. So I can say it is again a financial data. And number of employees. It is not a financial data. Na? It is non-financial data. Na? Because it is not in rupees. Okay? So, auditor is evaluating the financial information through study of relationship between salary per employee and the number of employees. And he concludes that this is fair enough. Reasonable hai. 10 lakh aa raha hai, haan, theek hai. There must not be any mistake. I have checked that salary per employee to management has given, number of employees I have checked on random basis by calling the employees or talking to the employees that whether you have received the salary or not. Okay? Now let's say the salary which has been reflected in the books of accounts. Now I'm talking about another situation whereby the salary which has been shown in the P&L is rupees 11 lakhs. The auditor obtained the same data from the management that 10,000 per employee salary is there, 100 are the number of employees, and 10 lakhs comes out to be the answer. Now this 11 lakh vis-a-vis 11 lakh which is shown in the P&L vis-a-vis 10 lakh which is as per auditor's calculation is something unusual. Is some fluctuation. It should have been 10 lakhs now. Because auditor did this calculation, he obtained the working from the management. However, it is shown at 11 lakh. Okay? So analytical procedure is not only when the auditor obtained the data and he evaluated the financial information. Analytical procedure also includes the investigation of identified fluctuation. Now, this is something inconsistent. Now, this is something unusual. Now, so auditor cannot ignore it. He will investigate. Investigate here means examine in detail. As is necessary, based on the situation. What will he investigate? The identified fluctuations. What is the identified fluctuations here? That in the second situation that I discussed, the salary which has been shown is 11 lakh, though when the auditor calculated it, based on the data provided by the management itself, it came out to be 10 lakhs. Okay? So analytical procedure includes two things, not only limited to evaluating the financial information, but if there is any inconsistency, then checking that in detail. Okay? Now let us have a look at the definition, and while we are discussing the definition, I want all of you to keep this example in mind. First example, that auditor was evaluating the financial information, which is what? Salary of rupees 10 lakhs. He analyzed what? Financial information and non-financial data. Okay? Which is what? Number of employees. Okay? Now let us have a look at the definition which has been given by essay 520. And as I've told you, the name of the essay is what? Simple analytical procedures. Okay? So analytical procedure means evaluation of financial information. What is the financial information that the auditor is evaluating? Rupees 10, just a minute. Rupees 10 lakh salary. This is the financial information, okay, from the P&L. Through analysis, study of. Now, tell me, when the auditor is analyzing this financial information, he asks the management to provide him with two data, that is salary per employee and number of employees. Okay? Can the auditor analyze this salary information by considering the relationship between depreciation rate and the number of employees? Obviously not. Why? Because there is no relationship between depreciation rate and number of employees now. So when the auditor has to consider, he is evaluating salaries, he will consider the correct relationship among the correct elements. है ना, depreciation और number of employees में थोड़ी ना कुछ होता है relationship, but yes, there is a relationship between what? Salary per employee and number of employees. So you need to study the correct elements. So let us have a look. Evaluation of financial information, which is rupees 10 lakhs, through analysis of plausible relationship. Now, what is plausible? So the dictionary meaning for plausible is what? Possible, reasonable, or believable. So ऐसे कोई भी थोड़ी ना element of the financial statements you will study. Hana? So whatever is the plausible, the term used by SA 520 is what? Plausible relationship among both financial data, which is what? Rupees 10,000 here, salary per employee, and the non-financial data, which is what? Number of employees, which was 100 in our case. Okay? So let us read this definition again. Evaluation of financial information through analysis of plausible relationship among both financial and non-financial data. So auditor is evaluating financial information, which is salaries of rupees 10 lakh, through analysis of possible, believable, reasonable, that is the term used is plausible relationship among both financial, that is rupees 10,000 per employee salary, and non-financial data, which is number of employees. Now, if you may have a question that, ma'am, auditor can perform test of details here also, na, in order to check rupees 10 lakh. Yes, auditor can do that. He may go for the routine checking. He may just take up the salary register. He may just take up the bank statements. He may obtain some confirmation from the employees also. But This depends upon auditor's professional judgment as to whether he wants to apply test of detail or analytical procedures or a combination of both. Okay, so is it clear? So I told you that analytical procedure is not only limited to evaluating the financial information. If any identified fluctuation is there, that also needs to be examined. So let us have a look at that also from your module. So this definition, SF-I-20, the name is analytical procedure. The term analytical procedure means evaluation of financial information. So I'll write the example here for your better understanding. 10 lakhs. Through analysis of plausible relationship among both financial, that is 10,000. The pen is not working properly. So this is 10,000 and non-financial data, which is what? 100 employees. Analytical procedure also encompass. What is meant by encompass? Include. Analytical procedure also encompass, which means what? Include, involve. What? Such investigation. Investigation here means examination, as is necessary, depending upon the circumstances of the case, depending upon the auditor's professional judgment of what? Of identified fluctuation. A difference between 10 lakhs and 11 lakhs is what? Identified fluctuation. A fluctuation that has been identified. Relationships that are inconsistent with other relevant information or that differ from expected values by a significant amount. Clear? So let us read this again. The term analytical procedure means evaluation of financial information through analysis of plausible relationship among both financial and non-financial data. It also encompasses, that is, it also includes the investigation as is necessary. See, each and every word has some meaning here. As is necessary. So depending upon the situation, depending upon the professional judgment, depending upon various factors of identified fluctuations or relationships that are inconsistent with other relevant information or that differ from expected values by a significant amount. So this is what analytical procedure. Now for all those who were asking me various doubts, now send in your queries again whether there is still any doubt. Because us time pe to when I was discussing, when I was making you understand this concept, you were sending me the queries. Now, since we have understood the concept of the definition of analytical procedure in detail now, whether you have any query, now you send it to me. Okay? So this is the concept of what? Analytical procedure. And from where did we, what is the sequence? So we have seen it here. Okay? That when the auditor is performing substantive procedure, he may perform test of details or analytical procedures. Okay? Now students, when we were doing essay 315, if you remember, and we discussed about risk assessment procedures. So risk assessment procedures you all have done in chapter number 3 and in chapter number 4 also we have done all these in details. Okay? So now when the auditor is performing risk assessment procedures under essay 315, you all have done that the auditor may perform inquiry, he may perform inspection, he may perform observation, or auditor may perform what? Analytical procedures. Okay? So when the auditor is assessing the risk of material misstatement by performing risk assessment procedures, so one of the procedures that has been told by SA 315 is what? Analytical procedure. So let me just give you an example. Then this will be clear to you. Suppose auditor, he is conducting the audit of an event management company. Okay? Event management, DJ, the other programs in the marriages or other functions. So event management company. Okay? So when the auditor is analyzing the data, he is performing risk assessment procedures. What is risk assessment procedures? The procedures which are performed to identify and assess the risk of material misstatement. How? Through understanding the entity and its environment. So auditor got an understanding that since in Corona period, the risk management companies have suffered a lot. There has been a great impact on their business. So it is expected, since the other companies in the similar industry, there is a fall in their GP ratio. So auditor is expecting a fall in the GP ratio of the client also. So what has auditor done? He has calculated the average GP ratio of the various other companies in the similar industry, which is event management company. And since he saw that Corona period has impacted it a lot, so there is a fall in the earning of the company, the GP ratio. Now, auditor analyzed this data. How? By calculating GP ratio of the other companies, and he assessed that with respect to his client also, there can be a drastic fall in the GP ratio of the company. So what has auditor done? He has calculated the GP ratio for the other companies in the similar industry, and at the end of the audit, he'll be comparing it with the GP ratio of the client. Okay? So what is auditor doing? When auditor estimates that since there is a fall in the GP ratio of the industry, there will be a fall. Let's say last year, in the last periods before Corona, 10% GP ratio was there for the average for the industry. And now it has fallen to, let's say, 5%. And auditor feels that, with respect to my client also, the GP ratio will be somewhere between 4 to 5%. So this 4 to 5%, what is it? Auditor is developing an expectation. Now, auditor is what? He is developing an expectation that for my client also, there will be a fall in the GP ratio. So we can understand that at the risk assessment stage also, auditor performs analytical procedures. But here, SA 315 will guide the auditor as to how to perform the analytical procedure. When auditor is performing analytical procedure as one of the risk assessment procedures, so at that time, he needs to consider what? He needs to consider SA 315. And when the auditor is performing the risk assessment procedure as substantive procedures, though SA 330 says that when the auditor is performing substantive procedure, he may perform analytical procedure. But what is the SA that guides the auditor? It is SA 520. Is it clear? So risk assessment procedures में अगर analytical procedure करना है तो SA 315 will be referred. And if auditor needs to perform this analytical procedure as substantive procedure, then SA 520. Quickly tell me, इतना clear है? See these calculations of analytical procedures, the ratios, comparisons, everything will be documented. Dhanalakshmi, you all have done SA 230 on audit documentation. So whatever analysis, whatever workings the auditor is doing, he'll always document them. Yes, Hiral, the investigation is necessary. Now, if you identify fluctuation, you are an auditor, you are an expert, you can just ignore it. You have to give an expert opinion. Na? You need to apply professional skepticism all the time. Why? In our example, auditor will apply professional skepticism na, that why there is a difference in this 11 lakh and 10 lakh, why there is a difference of 50,000 and 10,000, to applying professional skepticism. That is why auditor will what? He will examine in detail. ठीक है, Hiral, Dhanalakshmi, are your doubts clear? Is it clear? So is there any other doubt? Yes, Pooja. Pooja is saying, ma'am, auditor will analyze not only industry data? Yes. If you remember, what is the name of SA 315? Identifying and assessing the risk of material misstatement through understanding the entity and its environment. And if you remember, we have done a concept of knowledge of client business, whereby the first point is what? External factors, regulatory factors. Remember, supply, demand. The auditor needs to have an understanding of the environment within the organization, outside the organization. So whose query was it? Pooja, is it clear? Okay, Dhanlakshmi, is your doubt clear? Yes, Karthik. So when the auditor is applying analytical procedure as risk assessment procedure, SA 315 comes into picture. So students, see, I can say now, देखो यहाँ पर when auditor compared this data, just auditor compared this data, na, 50,000 companies paying, 10,000 others are paying. So I can say this is a kind of attention directing process. Auditor will get an idea that something fishy is there. 50,000 and 10,000 में तो difference है ना. Attention directing process, है ना. After auditor analyzes that 50,000 or 10,000, there is a identified fluctuation, he will work on that. No? He will investigate on that matter. He will discuss with the management. Management may give a very correct, a very genuine response to this query, that why there is a difference. Maybe the management is paying 50,000 per month because some other facilities are being provided to the management, to the client. And the other companies, they are getting only the premises. But why management, the client is paying 50,000, maybe they are getting some internet facilities, that area is soundproof, maybe something like that is there. Hana? So it is just an attention directing process. Na? When auditor analyzes it, the auditor feels that as we discussed this example, auditor finds that and he concludes that 4 to 5% hona chahiye GP ratio of my company, of my client. Now, if the actual GP ratio is somewhere between, let's say it is 8%. So this is something what? Fluctuation. This is something inconsistent. Na? Then auditor will examine that in detail. He will discuss with the management. Okay? So whose query was this? I don't remember. But have you understood that it is a kind of attention directing process? When there is something inconsistent, unusual has been identified by the management, he'll surely work towards, he'll surely extend his audit procedures towards them, towards that matter. Okay? Now, there is one more point here that I want to discuss. So we have seen that when the auditor is performing risk assessment procedures, auditor may perform analytical procedure and SA 315 will take care of that. When auditor will perform analytical procedure as substantive procedures. See, when the auditor is performing analytical procedure as substantive procedure, you may use the term substantive analytical procedures here. Okay? So don't get confused between analytical procedure and substantive analytical procedure. When the analytical procedures are being performed as substantive procedure, they will be termed as what? Substantive analytical procedure. Simple hai? And SA 520 comes into picture. Okay? Now, students, if you remember in chapter number 3, when you have understood the topic of assertion, there was a paragraph which explains that the auditor has to give an opinion on the financial statement as a whole. But that is not possible unless and until he concludes on each and every assertion of the financial statement. In simple language, that unless and until auditor P&L, in fact, all the items of P&L, all the items of balance sheet, all the disclosures, जब तक उन सबको check नहीं कर लेता है ना, auditor एक ultimate conclusion on the financial statement as a whole नहीं दे सकता है. ठीक है? So now, पहले हमने पढ़ा risk assessment procedures में analytical procedures होते हैं, substantive procedures में analytical procedures होते हैं. Now, when the auditor is drawing an overall conclusion about the financial statement, he is drawing an overall conclusion. Last में जब conclude कर रहा है auditor, देखो यहाँ पे एक develop किया ना expectation कि 4 to 5% should be my what the client's GP ratio. यहाँ पे auditor will actually calculate it ना when he's performing as a substantive procedure, and at the end when the auditor is drawing an overall conclusion, he will see whether his expectation of 4 to 5% and whatever is actually shown in the financial statement, whether they are matching or not, he'll draw an overall conclusion, and there again the auditor is performing what? The analytical procedure. So when the auditor is making overall conclusion, can I say this is the completion phase? When the auditor is on the verge of completing the audit, tabhi to he'll form an overall conclusion about the financial statement as a whole. Now, then also auditor applies analytical procedures, and there also SA 520 will come into picture. ठीक है, समझ आया? So I'll do one thing. देखो, I'll write this again. So what are the audit procedures? Students, today I don't have the time to repeat the topics again and again, so be with me. So we have seen that risk assessment procedures SA 315 में perform होते हैं. फिर in response to the auditor's assessment to risk, SA 330 में further audit procedures perform होते हैं, which can be what? Test of controls and and substantive procedures. ठीक है? When the auditor is performing substantive procedure, he may perform test of details or he may perform what? Analytical procedures. And test of details can further be divided as what? Vouching and verification. इतना समझ आया? ठीक है? So we have seen that when the auditor is performing the analytical procedure as risk assessment procedure, SA 315 is there. ठीक है? SA 330 क्या कहता है कि auditor may perform analytical procedure as what? Substantive procedure. ठीक है? Now SA 520 क्या बोलता है? That auditor may perform analytical procedure at this stage, which may be, can I say this is the testing phase? Test कर रहा है ना यहाँ पर. Can I say this is the planning phase? This is the testing phase, and at the completion phase also auditor may perform what? Analytical procedure, which is also dealt in by SA 520. So near the end of the audit, when the auditor has to see whether the expectation that he developed here and whatever calculations he did here, whether there is a difference between the same or not, at the completion stage also auditor may perform analytical procedure, and SA 520 is there, which gives the responsibilities, the scope, the objective of the auditor with respect to performing analytical procedures as substantive procedure and at completion stage. And when the auditor is performing analytical procedure as substantive procedure, these are termed as what? Substantive analytical procedure. And students, you will see when we will be discussing the objectives of SA 520 now, so that there are two objectives. Those objectives talk about these two phases, because यहाँ पर रिस्क असेस करते हुए तो वो SA 315 में कवर हो ही गया ना. ठीक है? So I'm sure this is going to be more clear to you when we will go through the relevant paragraphs in the module. देखो quickly अभी तक जितना किया है, let us just quickly recapitulate from the module. So since routine checks cannot be depended upon to disclose all, ऐसे तो नहीं लिखा ना any of the mistakes, ठीक है? All mistakes of manipulation that may exist. Certain other procedures like comparisons, like ratio analysis, trend and reasonableness test. See, what is reasonableness test? जो the example that I gave you for salaries ना, कि अगर number of employees इतना है, salary per employee इतना है, तो this is fair enough. इतना amount is reasonable. So that is nothing but reasonableness test. But we'll be doing that in detail when we'll be discussing the various techniques of analytical procedure. These are collectively known as overall test, and analytical procedures have acquired lot of significance as substantive audit procedure. SA 520 deals with it. Okay? Now, the example of that 50,000 rent. So, I'll read the conclusion here. See, however, if CA Amar does not make such comparison, what comparison? The rent being paid by the other companies in the similar area for the similar premises, and only checks the monthly payments and rent agreement of XYZ Limited, he would not have found the inconsistency, and as such, the misstatement may remain undetected. Clear? What are analytical procedure? Evaluation of financial information through analysis of plausible relationships among both financial and non-financial data. It also encompasses investigation as is necessary of identified fluctuation or relationship that are inconsistent with the relevant information or that differ from expected values by a significant amount. Okay? Then this example, this is about what? That wages per worker wala example. Okay? Now, is it clear? Is it clear jitna bhi humne kiya? And you can go through these example as your homework. I've discussed them, but reading part you can do as a homework. And these examples are beautifully written. They explains the entire concept very beautifully. Okay. Tell me, quickly send in your reply whether you have understood jitna bhi humne abhi tak kiya hai, whether everything is clear or not. Yes, Akashti, you are correct. Karthik, you are also correct. Aditi, you are also correct. ठीक है? Is it clear? चलो ठीक है. Now, students, when the auditor is applying analytical procedures, na, it includes comparison of entities' financial information. Now, quickly tell me what all comparisons can be done with entities' financial information. First, one example I have given, that auditor may compare the entity's financial information like 50,000 ka rent with the other companies in the similar industry. What all other comparisons can be there? Okay. So, it can be what? Comparison of entities' financial information for the period under audit with prior period. So, auditor, he may assess, for example, auditor may assess that since the GP ratio of the company has this trend in the last 3 years, so this year I'm expecting a GP ratio of 13% for my client. Clear? Okay? Is it clear? Simple example. So, with prior period, is it clear? Okay? And auditor may compare the entity's financial information with the budgets prepared by management. You must have done standard costing. Hai? So, comparison of the actual with the budgets and expectations developed by auditor. See, expectations can be developed by management in the form of budgets and forecasts, and expectations may be developed by the auditor also when he is assessing the risk of material misstatement. So, auditor may perform all such comparisons. Is it clear? Clear? So, this is the concept of what? Comparison of entities' financial information. We also saw that there is comparison of relationships. For example, see, this example we are doing again and again. When the auditor is comparing the GP ratio, so what is this? The relationship between gross profit and sales. Now, auditor is analyzing such relationship now. Right? So, this is the relationship that the auditor is analyzing. And can I say this is the relationship among financial data? Both the things are financial data. Na? GP, the gross profit also, it is in rupees. The sales also, which is in rupees. Hai? And the comparison may be done with the help of financial data as well as non-financial data. For example, the example of salaries that we have taken, that number of employees multiplied by salary. or it can be what? Another example of non-financial data. Tell me, क्या क्या हो सकता है? For example, auditor. Chabi, what is your doubt? So auditor may compare that ठीक है with respect to a property dealer, like a property constructing company. ठीक है? The company has given, let's say, 10,000 flats on rent. Rent per flat is what? Let's say it is a company which is having PGs, okay? And it gives on rent to all the college girls and boys. So 10,000 is the rent, and the company has given on rent, let's say, 700 PGs rooms. So, okay? So auditor may perform a reasonableness test there कि अगर 700 हैं on rent, apartments are there on rent, and 10,000 is the rent, so इतना rent is reasonable. So comparison of what? Non-financial and financial data also. ठीक है? So is it clear? So let me just take you through the module. So analytical procedure is a combination of what? Comparison of entities' financial information, consideration of relationships, and various other procedure. Like, see, whenever there is inconsistency, auditor will perform the investigation. Na? So all that will make what? Analytical procedures. So example of analytical procedures when the company is comparing the data, when the auditor is comparing, see, comparable information for prior period. So this example, this is your homework. What is mentioned here? That the company has traveling expense of 2 lakhs in the earlier year, and this year it is 2.5 lakhs. So the auditor inferred that there has been an increase of 25% in traveling expense incurred by the company, and he may compare such percentage increase with the trend in the earlier years. कि last year में कैसा trend था? Is there something unusual which needs to be further examined? Anticipated results of the entity such as budget forecast or expected by the auditor such as estimation of depreciation. The expectation can be developed by the management as well as by the auditor. Similar industry information. ठीक है? Averages, industry averages can be taken. What are the examples of relationship? So among elements of financial information, I gave example of gross profit and sales, है ना? Between financial data and relevant non-financial data. So see, this is the example given that client is having in the financial 90, 20, 20, 21, all these inventory ratio, gross profit margin ratio. Industry is having this. So auditor may perform the analytical procedures here. And there are various methods to perform analytical procedure. They may be simple or they may be complex calculation. If you all remember, in statistics, you have done linear regression, calculation of coefficient of correlation. Hai so all that are also used as what? Analytical procedures. So there may be simple comparisons the way we did कि last year GP ratio itna tha, this year kitna hona chahiye, ठीक है? Or there may be complex analysis, ठीक है? So what can be the comparison? Comparison of client industry data, comparison with prior period data, comparison with client expected results, with auditor expected results, and expected results using non-financial data. Yes, Karthik, you are absolutely correct. Aditi, you are correct. Okay? So basically what auditor is doing now, see, with respect to various assertion, auditor may feel कि ठीक है, analytical procedure लगाऊंगा. If the results are fine, I'll be satisfied. If there is some identified fluctuation, I'll check that in detail. So whether to apply test of detail on a particular assertion or analytical procedure or combination of both, it depends upon auditor's professional judgment. ठीक है ना? So the concept of SA 315, 330 and 520. अब यहाँ पर जिसको भी doubt थे, that diagram that I discussed, so it is going to make you clear. So देखो, be with me. देखो. The use of analytical procedures as risk assessment procedures is dealt in SA 315. Clear? SA 330. So first read this, then read this. See, I'm not able to write on the PDF. I don't know why. So bear with it. SA 330 includes. So this is the first you need to read. This is the second. So this is to clear na कि risk assessment procedures करना है SA 315. 330 includes requirement and guidance regarding the nature, timing, extent of audit procedure in responses to assess risk, These audit procedures may include substantive analytical procedures. So SA 330 says that अगर आपको substantive procedures करने हैं तो उसमें आप substantive analytical procedures कर सकते हो, ठीक है, पर वो कैसे करने हैं, वो गाइडेंस कहाँ से मिलती है? SA 520. It deals with the auditor's use of analytical procedure as substantive procedure. And I told you, when the auditor is going to use analytical procedure as substantive procedure, they'll be called what? Substantive analytical procedure. And as procedures near the end of audit that assist the auditor when forming an overall conclusion on the financial statements. ठीक है, तो we are using the analytical procedure as risk assessment procedures, as substantive procedures, and at the time, at the near the end of the audit to form an overall conclusion. ठीक है. So what are the objectives? अब देखो, risk assessment procedure is covered in SA 315, तो वो तो यहाँ आएगा नहीं. तो here 2 points will come: as substantive analytical procedures and as what your at the end of the audit. ठीक है. Now, students, if you remember, quickly I need replies from your side. SA 500, the entire series talks about what? Quickly tell me. SA 500 you all have done, है ना? तो the entire series of SA 500, उसमें what is the purpose? The purpose is to obtain audit evidence. So here also, why the auditor is applying analytical procedure now? Because he needs to obtain relevant, reliable audit evidence. So this is basically saying that when the auditor is performing the substantive, that is at the testing phase, when the auditor is performing analytical procedure, the objective is to obtain relevant, reliable audit evidence. Clear? Now listen to the B point with concentration. This relates to what? The completion stage. So to design and perform analytical procedure near the end of audit that assist the auditor when forming an overall conclusion as to whether the financial statements are consistent with the auditor's understanding of the entity, the understanding that he obtained when he was identifying and assessing the risk of material misstatement. जो वहां पर जो अंडरस्टैंडिंग थी कि जीपी रेशियो 4 to 5% के बीच में होना चाहिए, वेदर इट इज एक्चुअली सो और नॉट, है ना? सो पहले तो ऑडिटर कैन यूज द analytical procedure to develop expectation, and now at the end, near the end of the audit, auditor, when he's forming an overall conclusion about what, about whether the expectation that he developed under SA 315, whether that was correct or not, auditor will again use what, your analytical procedures. And when the auditor is using analytical procedures as substantive procedures, they are called what? Substantive analytical procedures. So please, students, don't get confused between substantive procedures and substantive analytical procedures. Substantive procedures can be of two types: test of details or your substantive analytical procedures. Like analytical procedures can be performed as what? Substantive analytical procedures. So I hope the objective is also clear. So I'll just look at the queries and then I'll move further, because as I've told you, we need to finish this chapter today itself. Also send in your replies whether you are able to understand the concept or not. Consider it as simple as what? Calculating ratios and making comparisons. Later on, we'll be discussing the various techniques also. So, correct, Hiran. So, auditor is using analytical procedure during the planning phase, during the testing phase, and the completion phase. And we will be doing this topic, this as a next topic now. So, send in your replies. So, Karthik, Siddharth, and Prabhas are saying, ma'am, it is clear. So estimation of depreciation में Chitala the question is how to perform analytical procedure regarding estimation of depreciation. So auditor will just estimate na ki rate of depreciation is itna, the value is itna, so such amount will come. So here he is performing what? Reasonableness test. Ki itna depreciation if it is coming in the financial statement, na, it is reasonable. है ना? लेकिन if there is a huge difference, if there is a certain inconsistency, auditor will always check that in detail. Complex analysis can be like linear regression and Pothina. When we'll be discussing the various techniques of analytical procedures, we will discuss this again. ठीक है? Siddharth, this is one of the type of analytical procedure, that is comparison of the data of the client with the industry. Prior period से भी compare कर सकते हो, आप trend analysis भी कर सकते हो, reasonableness test भी कर सकते हो, structural modeling. You may use complex calculations also. ठीक है सिद्धार्थ? So it is just one of the way of understanding what is analytical procedure. Analytical procedure is not only ratio and comparison. ठीक है students? It is not only ratios and comparison. See, you have to evaluate the information using the financial and non-financial data. Hana? So there can be number of ways. What are the various ways? Which we will discuss that when we will discuss the various techniques of analytical procedures. Okay? So I can see many of you are saying that ma'am understood till here. Okay? Now the next topic. Just a minute. Objectives is done. So I told you कि यहाँ पर risk assessment. Just a minute. So here we are not talking about when the analytical procedures are performed as risk assessment procedure. This is talking about the situation where analytical procedures are performed as substantive procedures, Hana? And here at the completion when the auditor has to form an overall conclusion. Clear? Okay. Now, what is the purpose? First of all, we will discuss a topic. What is the purpose? Okay. So, purpose of analytical procedure, when you will go through this entire topic, you will feel that whatever we have understood so far is the purpose of analytical procedure. When there are tests or details, then why to perform analytical procedures? You all have now understood that analytical procedure mein there is comparison of relationships. Okay? And the auditor has to assess whether the balances and other data, whether they are reasonable or not. 50,000 rent paid by the company was all good. But when the auditor compared it with the industry data, when the auditor compared it with the other company in the similar area, that was unusual, that was inconsistent. So, analytical procedure by their nature includes what? Comparisons and relationship. But auditor needs to assess whether account balances and other data, whether they are reasonable, fair or not. So he assesses various relationship among the P&L item and the balance sheet item. Like the relationship between what? Gross profit and sales. He compare it with the prior periods or the industry. He may compare the relationship between the ratio of trade receivable to total sales. So auditor may calculate debtors turnover ratio, the inventory turnover ratio, any ratios auditor may calculate, and what they will be called? They will be called that auditor is performing what? Analytical procedures. Okay? Is it clear? So basically, in order to know what is the unusual state of affairs that is there in the company, that is the purpose why the auditor is performing what? Analytical procedures. And students, auditor may perform inter-firm comparisons or intra-firm comparison. Inter-firm is comparing with the other companies in the similar industry. Hana? And intra-firm can be if you compare within the same company. For example, comparing the information of segment-wise information you are comparing. Intra-firm, within the firm. So auditor may perform all such calculation. Okay? So let's say auditor may compare various expenses as a percentage to sales or as a percentage to profit. So he may perform a trend analysis. Ki last 4-5 years say wages is coming as a 30% percentage to salary. But this year it has become 50% percentage of the salary by. So auditor may analyze this data and he may come to a conclusion that there may be chances of dummy workmen. है ना? So here what we are trying to understand, we are trying to understand the purpose. Purpose क्या है? So I told you it is a kind of attention directing process. देखो, when I have compared कि 50,000 और 10,000 rent है, तो अभी as such I cannot draw a conclusion now. But yes, if there is inconsistency and my attention is drawn there, na, I'll perform more audit procedures towards that. है ना? So auditor needs to see whether something unusual is there or not. ठीक है? And if something is material, he'll always discuss with the management. And if there is any chance of fraud, है ना, any unusual state of affairs is there which is indicating fraud, auditor will be in a position to identify such unusualness. ठीक है? Clear? So this is the purpose of the analytical procedures. Whatever we have discussed so far is what purpose only. So I'll do one thing. I will read from the module whatever are the, the crux line of this, that this purpose topic, and that is going to make each and everything clear to you. See, analytical procedure use comparisons and relationship to assess whether account balances or data appear reasonable. ठीक है? Establishing the relationship that exists between certain included in balance sheet, statement of P&L, and comparing with those that existed between the same set of balance in the previous year. That is, you are comparing with the previous year, the ratios. These are helpful in detection of unusual state of affairs and mistakes in the accounts. ठीक है? So whatever I'm not reading, you need to go through it since we have limited time. So that is why I'm taking you through the crux line. So the overall test can be extended to interfirm, that is other companies, and intrafirm, that is within the same company. ठीक है? So example, if balances included in P&L of the entity are compared with those contained in statement of P&L of same period of another entity engaged in the same trade and working under similar circumstances, it would be possible to find out cause of variation in the rate of profitability that exists. समझ आता है? Comparing the data with the other companies. Similarly, it would also be possible to compare the balances on the statement of P&L with the previous period. So basically, purpose has been told here. ठीक है? By setting up certain expense ratio as the basis of balances included in statement of P&L for the year under audit, comparing them with the same ratios in previous year, it is possible to ascertain the extent of increase, decrease in various items of expenditure in relation to sales and that of trading profit or in relation to sales. If you remember, I gave example of wages as a percentage to sales. See, any normal change is fine, but a drastic, unusual change is there. Wages has increased a lot as a percentage of sales. Why? Are there some dummy workmen which has been fake workmen which has been included in this year? So, if differences found are material, the auditor would ascertain the reasons, what are the reasons, and assess whether the accounts have been manipulated to inflate or suppress the profits. Our example of 50,000 rent. What is the reason? Why my client is paying 50,000, others are paying 10,000? Suppress करना है क्या profits? Profits कम दिखाने हैं क्या? तभी management ने क्या 40,000 per month extra rent show किया है? ठीक है? Auditor will consider all that thing. So let us just have a look at the concluding line. Thus, it is important to note that analytical procedure may help identify existence of unusual transactions, events, amounts, ratios, trends that might indicate matter that have audit implications. Unusual or unexpected relationships that are identified may assist the auditor in identifying risk of material misstatement, especially risk of material misstatement due to fraud. Clear? The purpose, whether it is clear, I'm sure it must have been clear to you. Why? Because this is just a revision of whatever we have understood about analytical procedure. Okay? Now, what are the timing? So, since we have understood that concept, whereby I made that table of all the audit procedure, now though it must have been clear that at the planning phase, at the testing phase, and the completion phase, at all the three phases, the analytical procedures are used. So, an experienced auditor, see, experience to chahiye na, you are analyzing something. है ना, प्रोफेशनल जजमेंट लगा रहे हो, प्रोफेशनल स्केप्टिसिज्म लगा रहे हो, the auditor needs to be experienced, he needs to use analytical procedure in all stages. ठीक है, so students, we will be doing planning phase and testing phase in detail in our inter. This completion phase is in detail when you will go in, you will study this subject in your finals. ठीक है, so in this book there is a small paragraph on completion phase, we will go through that, but in detail it is in your finals. Planning phase and testing phase we will be doing it. ठीक है, so let me just have a look at the queries. So I'll do one thing, I will complete this planning phase, then only we will take a break, but before that let me just have a look at the query. Okay, there is no query as such, and Karthik, whatever you have written is, your understanding is correct. Okay, so at the planning stage, when the auditor is using analytical procedure, so what is basically auditor doing? See, at the planning phase, auditor is what? He is understanding the entity. He's trying to obtain an understanding of the client business, and he wants to identify the potential risk that are associated with his client. Potential is what? Likely risk. Okay? How will analytical procedure help there? For example, I gave you example of event management company. So when the auditor was at the planning stage, understanding the entity, he found that in the corona period, the event management company has suffered a lot. Now he applied analytical procedure. He saw what other companies in the similar industry, what is the impact on their profit margins. And he developed an expectation that, okay, with respect to my client also, there should be a fall in the profit margins. So what is he doing? He's applying analytical procedure. Why? Because he wants to identify the areas of potential, likely, possible risk by indicating the developments in the business entity. Okay? And based on his assessment here, auditor determines the nature, timing, extent of his audit procedures. Okay? For example, there is a company whereby there has been an increase in the sales of all the industries. Maybe it is there has been a demand from a foreign country with respect to, let's say, some or mask. Okay? Now there has been increase in the number of workers that has been hired by companies. Okay? So now auditor knows, when he has understood the entity, that in this entity there has been an increase in the hire in the employment of various workers in this company. There is a risk also associated. It might be possible that the company may show dummy workmen. So this is the risk that has been identified. Now what will auditor do? Since he has compared it with the other companies in the similar industry, he'll develop an expectation that baki companies may the wages has or the salaries has increased itna, so in my client case also the wages, salaries, they are going to increase by 10 or 20%. Now he's going to determine the nature, timing, extent of his audit procedures to be performed for this particular assertion of wages. कि अब मेरे को wages detail में check करना है. Why? Because when auditor applied the risk assessment procedures, and as risk assessment procedure, he applied analytical procedure. He compared the data with the industry information. He found that workers may increase हुआ है, wages may increase हुआ है, but there is also a risk that dummy workmen may have been included. So he will determine the nature, timing, extent of his audit procedure towards that specific balance, specific class of transaction. So this is the role of analytical procedure when auditor is what? He is planning the audit. So very simple, you may get a 3-mark question, straightforward question, that whether auditor performs an analytical procedure in the planning stage. Or you may get true, false, that analytical procedure can be performed at the planning stage and testing phase, but they cannot be performed at the completion phase, which is not correct. Okay? Simple. Hai? So let us have a look at this. In planning stage, analytical procedure assists the auditor in understanding the client's business and in identifying potential likely risk by indicating aspects and developments. You can write here. Maybe I will not be able to write. I don't know what is the problem. So you may write example of event management company. These examples are for your understanding. As such, you need not cram or learn these examples, है ना, understanding के लिए है ना, whatever is to be written in your exam is whatever is given in your module, है ना. ये event management company के या other examples, these are for your understanding, ठीक है. And whatever dictionary meanings also I discussed, those are not for learning as such, those are for your better understanding. This information will assist the auditor in determining the nature, time, and extent of his other audit procedures. देखो है ना, wages में increase है. Auditor feels that there is a risk कि dummy workman तो नहीं है. So he'll now analyze. He'll now determine the nature, time, and extent of his other audit procedures, and it uses both financial and non-financial data such as number of employees, square feet of selling space, volumes of goods purchased, and other information. ठीक है. Analytical procedure may help the auditor during planning stage to determining the entity of audit procedure that will be used to obtain audit evidence for specific account balance. I gave you example of what? Wages. अच्छा, now I am able to write wages, है ना. So specific account balances, ठीक है. So with this we have covered the planning phase, ठीक है. Now substantive analytical procedure means auditor is performing the analytical procedure as one of the substantive procedures, that is at the testing phase, है ना. So we will do one thing, we will take a 10 minutes break here, and quickly after the break, quickly come back after 10 minutes because a lot of things are to be discussed and I really want to revise the entire chapter. So these 2.5 hours, they will definitely cover the entire chapter number 8 along with the revision if possible. And before going for the break, please send in your queries and also please let me know whether you are able to understood this concept or not. So a quick break of 10 minutes here. So students, I hope you all are back after the break. Okay? And I'll quickly start since we have a lot of topic to cover today. So our next topic is substantive analytical procedure. That is when the auditor is using the analytical procedure at the testing phase. Okay? So we all have seen that auditor may use test of details or analytical procedures or a combination of both. Hana? It depends upon auditor's professional judgment as to whether to use analytical procedure, whether to use test of details, or whether to perform what? Both, a combination of both. And what is the ultimate purpose of the auditor? See, he will see which of the audit procedure is effective in order to reduce audit risk to an acceptably low level. Okay? So the ultimate purpose is to reduce audit risk to an acceptably low level. Auditor may make a combination of both audit procedures, the test of details and analytical procedure. He may only go for test of details. He may go for what? Analytical procedure. Okay? Now students, see whether to use analytical procedures or not. It depends upon various factors, which is our next topic. Okay. Before that, just try to understand that when we are saying that one of the types of analytical procedure is calculation of ratios, comparison of the data with the industry, it might be possible that the management has already prepared such data. So auditor may use such data provided auditor is satisfied that such data, when it is prepared, it is prepared properly. The internal controls were effective on the preparation of data. So if auditor is satisfied, he may make use of the data which has been prepared by the management, right? Now, in order to analyze as to whether to perform test of details or substantive procedures, first of all, before that, auditor will consider various factors. Auditor will consider various factors. See, let's say, for example, auditor wants to apply one of the analytical procedure of comparing the client data with the industry data. Okay? Now tell me, in a situation where my client is Indian Railways, which is a monopoly in itself, there is no comparable data. Can I apply such analytical procedure? Obviously not. I'm giving you example of GP ratio again and again. For a startup, if my client is a startup, will I be in a position to apply, to compare it with the other already set company, or to check the GP ratio, to compare the GP ratio of the other companies? No. So there are certain factors which auditor has to consider in order to see whether substantive analytical procedures can be applied or not. Tabhi to apply karega na. Hana? So at the time of deciding as to whether to apply substantive analytical procedures or test of detail or a combination of that, auditor will consider various factors. What are those? Availability of data, disaggregation, account type, source, predictability, nature of assertion, inherent risk, or what can go wrong. We will discuss all these factors in detail one by one. Okay? These are very simple and yes, very important for your descriptive question. Okay? So tell me whether you are able to understood what is the concept that we are understanding. Okay? So what are the various factors? Availability of data. So I gave you example of what Indian Railways. Comparable data is not available. This is a startup. You cannot compare it. Let's say our company is a startup. You cannot compare it with the other companies. There is no other startup in the similar industry. So the availability of the reliable, relevant data, it will facilitate effective analytical procedure. So the first factor is what? Availability of data. So is it clear? I need your replies in order to be sure that you all have joined and you all are back with me. So is availability of data clear? Quickly send in your yes or no. ठीक है. Hitesh Kartika is saying yes, ma'am, it is clear. ठीक है. The second point is disaggregation. ठीक है. Or I can say segregation. when you segregate the data, disaggregation, which is not aggregate नहीं आ रहा, disaggregation कि data को bifurcate किया हुआ है नहीं. For example, the auditor wants to compare the total of expenses, basically each and every expense, the total of all such expense like fuel, the power and fuel, the traveling, the wages, with the data of other companies in the similar industry. Okay? So auditor is having the bifurcation of total expenses of his client, but he is not having the bifurcation of the total expenses of the industry. So data is not disaggregated, that is, data is not segregated. So will auditor be able to apply that particular analytical procedures? No. Hana? Let's say, for example, there are 4 segments in an organization. The company has 4 products. Okay? This year, the company is having a data of expenses relating to all 4. Let's say there are 4 like north, south, east, west. So company has a bifurcation of all the expenses कि north में इतना हुआ था, south में इतना हुआ था, east में इतना, west में इतना. But last year such bifurcation was not available. So is the comparison of such data with the prior period, is it possible? No. So disaggregation. ठीक है, clear? Account type. ठीक है, very simple, but just try to understand the examples. See, substantive analytical procedures, these are more useful for what? Income statement accounts, your P&L items. Why? Because they are accumulated transactions. है ना? आप देख सकते हो ना कि purchases last time इतना था, last to last year इतना था, this year, let's say, sales, there has been an increase of, let's say, 2% in the last 3 years. So this year auditor will expect कि ठीक है इस साल 16% increase होगा, है ना? Vis-a-vis, with respect to balance sheet item, auditor might not be able to apply analytical procedure. हाँ, balance sheet item पर अगर analytical procedure the auditor wants to apply, what he can do, see, trade receivables. As such, last year trade receivables itna tha, this time there should be a 10% increase. This is not an exact relationship. But if you say that trade receivable as a percentage of total sales last year, this was the ratio, and trade receivable this year as a percentage of sales, this is an increase. So auditor may analyze like this now. So I can say with respect to income statement items, application of substantive analytical procedure may be easy. Why? Because they are accumulation of a transaction over a period of time. But since balance sheet item are the net effect of transaction as on a particular day, so they may not be, the analytical procedure may not be applied on such balance sheet items. But now how to use analytical procedure with respect to balance sheet item? Auditor may make use of what? Comparisons. Like I gave you example, अगर आप कहते हो कि trade receivable last time 10 lakhs थे, इस बार 11 lakhs है, vis-a-vis a situation whereby you say that trade receivable as a percentage of sales last year was 70%, now this year it is 75%. So the second situation is a better comparison, na? ठीक है? So the next point is what? Your account type. I hope it is clear. Then source. So again, see the transactions which are similar in nature, like routine transaction, your purchases, sales, on that application of the analytical procedure is easy. Take another example of significant class of transactions. For example, the research and development expenditure. You cannot say na कि last year research and development पे इतना expense हुआ था, this year इतना expense होना चाहिए. Because R&D, this is a significant class of transaction. This is not a recurring transaction. This is not a recurring expenditure. Advertisement expenditure. So in case of such, auditor will have to check in detail ना यहाँ पर analytical procedures कैसे apply करोगे? Yes, with respect to routine transaction like your purchases, like your sales, the analytical procedures can be applied. But with respect to class of transaction like research and development, where management judgment is involved, है ना, which are not predictive in nature. You cannot predict them, na, है ना. So in that case, the auditor will have to perform the test of details. वहां पर तो checking detail में करना ही पड़ेगा ना, research and development का advertisement example. ठीक है. Our next point is relating to what? Predictability. Simple. The relationships, the items which are predictable, you can always predict a relationship between the gross profit and the sales. You can always compare it with the other industry data or the prior period item. So if the assertion, if the relationship that you are checking, it is predictable over time, there is a relationship that is expected to exist and continue over time, then application of analytical procedure in such a situation is an easy task. Okay? Or is a correct task. Correct? Next point, nature of assertion. You all have read about a number of assertion in chapter number 3. Now tell me, when I as an auditor, I have to check the completeness of sales, the valuation of sales. Last time there was a sales of, let's say, rupees 100 crores. This time there may be an increase of 15% or 20%. So valuation में, measurement में, है ना, measurement और completeness में तो I can apply analytical procedure. Now tell me, if I have to check the ownership of a building, can I say कि last year तो ये building management की थी, अभी भी management की होगी? You cannot say like that. Now you will have to check the building, the documents relating to building, the electricity bill, the property title deed, everything you will have to check in detail, na? है ना? So I can say nature of assertion, like measurement, completeness, all these assertions you can apply analytical procedure. But where you have to check what rights and obligations, there though you will have to perform what? Test of details. So basically we are discussing what various factors that auditor has to keep in mind when he's deciding as to whether to apply test of details or analytical procedure or combination of both. And last, inherent risk. Now for this I want an answer because chapter 4 may I know I have explained this to you. Tell me, see, analytical procedures में हम क्या कर रहे हैं? We are finding that if there is something unusual, है ना, या reasonable है, जैसे salary का example लिया. If auditor feels that there is an inherent risk with respect to salaries, let's say, है ना, auditor को लगता है there is an inherent risk, chances of dummy workmen are there. Tell me, will auditor rely only on substantive analytical procedure? Quickly, a yes or no. Quickly send in your reply. I need your replies, please. Students, please cooperate for today because I need to finish the entire chapter and not in a hurry. I want you all to understand each and every bit of this chapter. It is my endeavor to make you understand each and every line of this chapter. Okay? But I need your quick answers and you all are saying no. When the inherent risk is high, है ना, with respect to let's say salaries, auditor को पता है कि there is an inherent risk, dummy workmen हो सकते हैं. Why? Because he identified and assessed the risk of material misstatement through understanding the entity and its environment under SA 315. So accordingly, he will decide his audit procedures. He may not rely only on substantive analytical procedures. So these were the factors. You can go through all these factors as a homework at home, and we have discussed each and every example for each and every factor. So what are the factors? Availability of data. I gave you example of monopoly or startups. Disaggregation, segment wise information ही नहीं है. Account type, income statement में अच्छे से apply कर सकते हो. vis-a-vis balance sheet. Why? Because balance sheet items में तो आपका that is an item at a particular point of time ना. ठीक है? Source. The routine kind of transaction, purchases, sales, wages, salaries, you can apply analytical procedure. Traveling expense last year 10,000 tha. This year I'm expecting an increase of 5%. You can analyze that. But research and development expenditure, है ना, these are significant classes of transaction. You cannot assess, predict them. And the next points relate to what? Predictability. The relationship that the accounts that are predictable over time and that relationship exists and continue over time. You are in a position to apply analytical procedure. देखो GP ratio आप last 4 years की क्यों compare कर रहे हो? Because there is a relationship between GP and sales and that is continuing to exist over time. Na? Clear? Nature of assertion, rights and obligations के लिए you cannot apply analytical procedure. ना वहाँ तो you will have to check in detail. Proper inspection of documents would be required now. And inherent risk, if the inherent risk is high, auditor will not solely depend upon substantive analytical procedures. Okay? So there is one query. Let me just have a look at it. See, these analytical procedures are performed by whom? By auditor. So whatever data is prepared, whatever calculations are done, auditor does that. Okay? But the data with respect to analytical procedure will be obtained from the management itself. And see, we have done this, Hiral. This is for your doubt. See, the auditor may inquire management as to availability and reliability of information needed to apply substantive analytical procedure. Auditor may say, management, tell me, data available hai? Who has prepared it? Hana, management says, let's say management says that we have also calculated certain ratios to see. And the results of any such analytical procedures performed by the entity, it may be effective to use analytical data prepared by management provided the auditor is satisfied that such data is properly prepared. And obviously, auditor applies professional skepticism throughout the audit. Hana? If he's relying on any data, and you all have done in chapter number 3, reliability of data depends upon the source and nature of the data. Hana? So it is internal data, na? So he'll see whether internal controls are effective or not. He'll check that data. Okay, Hiral, is it clear? Clear? Okay. Now the next topic, which you all were asking me again and again, that ma'am, give us example of the analytical procedures that can be applied. So the next topic is techniques available as substantive analytical procedure. That means, देखो, इससे ऊपर वाला topic क्या था? कि substantive procedures. See, factors to be considered for substantive audit procedures. कि क्या करना है? Test of detail करना है, सब analytical procedures करना है, और combination of both, है ना? अब auditor ने decide कर लिया. तो उससे पहले ऑडिटर क्या देखेगा? व्हाट आर द टेक्निक्स, सब्सटैंटिव एनालिटिकल प्रोसीजर्स कैसे हो सकते हैं? तो देयर आर 4 ways: ट्रेंड एनालिसिस, रेशियो एनालिसिस, रीजनेबलनेस टेस्ट एंड स्ट्रक्चरल मॉडलिंग. ठीक है? ठीक है? ट्रेंड एनालिसिस, रेशियो एनालिसिस, रीजनेबलनेस टेस्ट एंड स्ट्रक्चरल मॉडलिंग. ठीक है? So Hiral, your doubt is clear, na? ठीक है. Now trend. Quickly send in the replies. What in your understanding is meant by trend? So the first one is what? Trend analysis. So what is trend? So I can say it is a general direction, dictionary meaning just, in which something is developing. So देखो, as the name suggests, कि what is the trend? Last 3 years, last 4 years, this has been the trend. So considering the situation, auditor may find as to what should be the trend this time. Last 4 years, say there has been an increase of 1% in the GP ratio. This year also, I expect an increase of 1% in the GP ratio. Trend analysis. You are analyzing the trend. And it is a very common technique, whereby prior period balance, या तो last year से compare करते हो, और ट्रेंड इन 2 or more prior period balances. Last 2-3 years से आप कंपेयर करते हो किसको? The auditor evaluates whether the current balance of account moves in line with the trend established with previous balances, and based on an understanding of factors that may cause the account to change. So as such, there is no problem in the change, but auditor needs to understand what the factors that have led to a change. For example, let's say the auditor feels that in the salaries for the last last 3 years, the salaries has been 10% of the total expenses, let's say. Okay? This year, this salaries percentage, this has increased to 30%. This is something unusual. Na? This is something fluctuation. Na? So auditor will investigate it. Hai? So he looked at the trend of the last 2-3 years. He compared it with the current year. If there is a fluctuation, he will analyze it. ऐसा भी तो हो सकता है ना, some dummy workman has been included, है ना? So, in other words, trend analysis implies analyzing account fluctuations by comparing current year to prior year and information from several years. Example, the auditor may compare salary paid. There may be some percentage increase. कुछ तो होगा. Let's say this is what 10%, this is 12%, this is 14%. है ना? In the salary expense, however, unusual increase in such expense amount may indicate fraudulent payment being made to fake employees. देखो अब when auditor finds that there is something unusual, इससे कुछ conclusion तो draw नहीं होता है ना. But this is what attention directing process. Now auditor will extend his audit procedure towards salary. Auditor will discuss with management. Management may give a very genuine response. So this may be correct, but this is what something unusual. So auditor will do what? He will investigate that. Okay? Ratio analysis, so you all know. Comparing the various useful for analyzing asset liability accounts as well as revenue expense. Okay? An individual balance sheet account is difficult to predict on its own. If you remember, I gave you example of debtors. Last year debtors 10 lakh, this year 20 lakhs and nahi. But if you compare them as a percentage of sales, then you can analyze. But its relationship to another account is often more predictable, like trade receivable balance related to sales. And ratios can be compared with separate entities within the group, like the group companies, the ratios of other companies in the same industry, or it can be compared over time. Simple hai. What are the financial ratios? This can be example. The statutory auditor can review GP ratio of the company for the year under audit. The auditor may further compare it with the GP ratio of the company in earlier years or with other company in the similar industry. Simple. Tell me whether you are able to understand or not. Hana? Third is what? Reasonableness test. बहुत simple है ये techniques. Reasonableness test. And students, you'll be surprised to know that you all have already covered reasonableness test. When we started our chapter, we took the example of number of employees multiplied by the salary per employee. We considered what? Financial and non-financial data. And we saw that whether it is fair enough, whatever is coming in the P&L. So that is nothing but what? Reasonableness test. What is reasonable? Fair enough. Hana? So auditor may use various non-financial data. Hana? But here we are not comparing it with the prior period. Na? Ratios mein to we were comparing it with the prior period. Trend analysis what with prior period only. But here we are not comparing with prior period. We are just using what? Non-financial data of the current period. Okay? So what is it? Unlike trend analysis, this analytical procedure does not rely on events of prior periods. Because trend ka to matlab hi kya hai? Depending upon prior period. So that is why unlike trend analysis. But upon non-financial data for the period under audit, you may get true false that in reasonableness test the auditor depends solely on prior period data, which is not correct. Okay? Example, occupancy rate to estimate rental income ki itna flats have been given on rent, this is the rent, so itna rent agar aa raha hai, that is reasonable enough. Hana? These tests are generally more applicable to income statement on certain accrual or prepayment accounts. Okay? So you consider the relationship. For example, see interest expense against interest bearing. That 5% is the interest rate and in loan of rupees 1 lakh has been taken. So itna amount should come in the P&L. Is it coming same? ठीक है, reasonable है. ठीक है? Raw material consumption to production. Wages scrap percentage as production or raw material consumption. Work in progress based on issued materials and sales. So see, if you'll see na, see sales discount commission as against sales volume, rental against occupancy. Everywhere non-financial data is being used na. So usage of non-financial data in reasonableness test is there. See, it's mentioned, but upon non-financial data for the period under audit. Clear? Then is structural modeling, which is the fourth technique. And for all those who are saying, ma'am, what complex calculations? So see, the modeling tool constructs a statistical model of financial and non-financial data of prior accounting period to predict the current account balances, like linear regression. See, what is linear regression? Whereby you study the relationship between two variables where one is a dependent variable on the other. Hana? So linear regression, calculation of coefficient of correlation, everything that you have done in statistics, many of you have earlier written that ma'am statistics foundation का तो भूल गया, कुछ नहीं होता भूल गया तो you need not as such for the purpose of this chapter you need not as such know as to how to calculate and all that, though you should know as a CA student you should know, but these are the various techniques. Hana? For the purpose of this chapter, you just need to know that structural modeling is where the financial data, non-financial data of prior accounting periods are there used to predict the current year balance. Example, linear regression. Okay? So with this, we have covered the 4 techniques available as substantive analytical procedures. So is it clear? Is it clear? Tell me. Students, I don't think that I'll be able to take up the question answers, Hana, in this session today. So what you can do is you can go through the questions which I have uploaded. Answers are also uploaded. In case of any doubt, the same can always be asked whenever I'll take the next chapter. Learning. So Aditi is saying, ma'am, everything is clear till now, but learning में थोड़ा डर लग रहा है कि इतना कैसे learn होगा, क्या याद रहेगा exams तक, how to overcome it. See, one of the best ways when you understand a topic now. Just today you have this session whereby we would complete chapter number 8. Read it today itself from the module in entirety. है ना, जहां आपको लगता है कि मैम फोकस्ड ऑन दिस वर्ड, दीज आर द कीवर्ड्स, हाईलाइट देम. जहां आपको लगता है यू नीड टू मेक अ समरी, सी जैसे अब यहाँ है डिटरमाइन सूटेबिलिटी ऑफ एनालिटिकल प्रोसीजर, देयर इज अ स्पेस हियर ना, यू कैन राइट इन शॉर्ट व्हाट आर द कीवर्ड्स हियर. यू नीड टू फॉलो दीज टेक्निक्स. ठीक है अदिति, लर्निंग, सी दिस कोर्स इज नॉट ओनली फॉर अ सिंगल स्टूडेंट ना, सभी को करना है ना यार, सभी को लर्न करना है ना. एंड इफ यू रिमेम्बर इन अ लास्ट सेशन देयर वाज वन स्टूडेंट पार्थ शाह. By following all those techniques, he secured 67 marks. He secured an AIR 15, है ना. So मेहनत तो करनी पड़ेगी. हाँ ठीक है, be a smart learner. Keywords pick करो. Learn the definitions as sir has asked you. ठीक है. Clear, Aditi? Read the chapter in entirety. Keywords जो हैं, जो भी आपको मॉड्यूल में नोट्स बनाना है वहां पे पिक करो. As sir has asked you कि जो पॉइंट्स वाले, जहां पे पॉइंट्स आर गिवन, do not leave that topic ever, है ना. And pick up the keywords. Definitions are to be learned, है ना. So do that learning, and once there is a flow of, like, once you have learned, you will find that there will be a flow of technical words in your mind whenever you will open the book, है ना. Let's say आपने 50 definitions learn कर ली as sir has asked you. So after learning 50 definitions now, you will be yourself automatically using the technical language, because आपको 50 definitions में technicalities आपको पता चल गया है ना, what language is to be used. And keywords pick करना, then using your own language as a connecting language is very simple. हाँ, conceptual clarity is required, and it is my endeavor that I make each and everything clear to you. ठीक है. बट अगर आप उसके बाद रीड नहीं करोगे मॉड्यूल से, then all these discussions will not help you a lot, है ना. So working hard, working smart is definitely required. एंड ऐसा नहीं कि आफ्टर 10 days, आफ्टर 15 days, राइट नाउ इट इज रिक्वायर्ड. ठीक है अदिति? सो दीति हैव रिटन ट्वाइस यस मैम. बस चलो ठीक है. सो नाउ earlier we discussed various factors, that what are the factors the auditor has to consider when he's deciding as to whether to use test of details or analytical procedures or both. We saw availability of data, disaggregation and various factors. Then we saw what are the techniques available. Now in this topic, auditor has decided that he is applying analytical procedure as substantive test. ठीक है? अब ये जो 4 techniques हैं, इधर भी तो auditor will have to see ना that which technique to follow, है ना? So इधर also तो auditor will see ना what audit technique to what analytical procedure to apply. So this is the topic that here auditor has decided that he is applying analytical procedure. So what are the 4 things that he has to consider? So the auditor will have to determine the suitability of particular analytical procedure. He will evaluate the reliability of data. He will develop an expectation and determine the acceptable difference. ठीक है? So what are all these? See, these 4 points are mentioned here as 1, 2, 3, 4, and then these are explained in these paragraphs 4, 5, 6 and 7. ठीक है? So let us have a look at these points. And students, देखो, earlier auditor was deciding whether to apply analytical procedures or test of details or both, है ना? तो वहां पे auditor considered as to whether reliable data is available or not. ठीक है? Here also, when the auditor is determining as to now that he has decided that analytical procedures to apply करने ही हैं, but what 4 things auditor will consider, you will find that some repetition is there, है ना? वहां पर डिसाइड करना था डेटा अवेलेबिलिटी, यहाँ पर डिसाइड करेगा डेटा रिलायबिलिटी ऑल्सो. हाउ एंड व्हाट ऑल टू बी कंसिडर्ड, देखो, लेट अस स्टार्ट. First point, determine the suitability of particular substantive analytical procedure for the given assertion. उसको क्या चेक करना है? ठीक है? Assessed risk of material misstatement, जो ROMM उसने डिसाइड assess किया है, considering that, and test of details if any he is decided to perform. So basically what is this? Auditor is performing analytical procedure, whether alone or in combination. ठीक है? Combination to what? Test of details. So first of all, he'll determine which of the particular substantive analytical procedure is suitable. ठीक है? And in that, he will see what assertion he is checking. What is the assessed risk of material misstatement? Is he performing any other test of detail here? Just a minute. So he will consider all these points. ठीक है? Then when he's decided the particular substantive analytical procedure, he will evaluate the reliability of data from which auditor's expectation is to be developed. And reliability depends upon what source of data, whether it is comparable, what is the nature, whether it is relevant or not. We will be discussing each and every point in detail. So once the auditor has determined the suitability of particular substantive analytical procedure, he has determined the reliability of data, he will develop an expectation of recorded amounts or ratios, and he will evaluate whether the expectation is sufficiently precise to identify a misstatement. See, if the auditor, let's say auditor is checking advertisement expenses, so only analytical procedure is not sufficient, na? So whether he can develop an expectation using that, right? Whether an expectation can be developed which is sufficiently precise. Precise is what? Accuracy. So basically auditor will examine whether the expectation can be developed with accuracy or not. And last but not the least, auditor will determine the amount of any difference of recorded amounts from expected values that is acceptable without further investigation. कि चलो मैंने reasonableness test decide किया है, तो I have based on my calculation, let's say that 1000 employees are there, ठीक है, no, 100 employees are there who are getting 1000 salary, rupees 1000, ठीक है, per year, and 100 employees are there who are getting rupees 1200 as salary. So ऑडिटर ने यहाँ रीजनेबलनेस टेस्ट लगाया एंड ही टुक एन एवरेज कि ठीक है, अगर मेरा जो कैलकुलेशन है सैलरी का कंपनी का नियर अराउंड 1,10,000 आता है, इट इज फाइन. सो दिस इज व्हाट एन डेवलपिंग एन एक्सपेक्टेशन. एंड ही सेज दैट अगर इसमें 500 प्लस माइनस आता है, दैट इज ऑल्सो एक्सेप्टेबल टू मी. So see, determine the amount of any difference, 500 of recorded amounts from expected values, that is acceptable without further investigation. है ना? So based, see, first of all, auditor will see which assertion he wants to check, whether he is performing test of details or not, what is the assessed risk of material misstatement. ठीक है? Now he has decided, ठीक है, reasonableness test he'll be performing. Second step में he'll see whether this data is reliable or not. ठीक है. Now we have understood that data is reliable because this is prepared. This is generated from an automated system. ठीक है. This is the second step. Third step, he will develop an expectation कि based on my calculation ना, by applying reasonableness test, it will be somewhere around 1,10,000 the salary expense. In the fourth step, he will determine that what difference is acceptable without further investigation. कि मेरे हिसाब से 1,10,000 आना चाहिए होता है, आना चाहिए, but plus minus 500 is fine with me. If it is plus minus 500, I'll not go for detailed checking now. ठीक है. But yes, if it is beyond that, I will go for a detailed checking. So as simple as that. These are the 4 steps. Try to understand the 4 steps and learn the 4 steps, keeping this in mind. कि auditor को क्या check करना है, which is the suitable analytical procedure. तो उसके लिए क्या देखना है, assessed risk of material misstatement, what is the assertion he wants to check, and what are the test of details he is performing if any. ठीक है, देख लिया. अभी data management ने दे दिया. So whether this is reliable or not, it depends upon 4 factors. What are the 4 factors? It depends upon the source of data, the comparability, the nature and relevance, and control over preparation of information if it is prepared through internal sources. ठीक है, कर लिया. अब क्या करना है? अब auditor will see whether expectation can be developed sufficiently precise. Precise is what? Accurately develop हो सकता है या नहीं हो सकता है. ठीक है, वो भी कर लिया. Then what is the amount of difference of recorded amounts from expected that is acceptable without further investigation? इतना difference है तो I'll not go for detailed checking, otherwise I'll go for detailed checking. Clear? Is it clear? ठीक है. Now let us have a look at all these 4 points quickly, because now you have understood the concept as to what is contained in these 4 points. Students, send in whether you have understood. So Siddharth is saying, ma'am, is company audit in your hands, so that the further schedule will tell you, है ना? चलो, suitability of particular analytical procedures for given assertion. So first of all, see, when are analytical procedures suitable? Consider them, like, just listen to me. These explanation I have told you abhi just, but I'm just taking you through the module so that when you read at home, you are familiar with the module. So substantive analytical procedure generally more applicable to large volume of transactions which are predictable over time. ठीक है, where the relationships among data exist and continue in the absence of known conditions to the contrary. Example, known condition to the contrary क्या? अब GP ratio, ग्रॉस प्रॉफिट एंड योर सेल्स में यू कैन कंपेयर इट विद द प्रीवियस ईयर. बट अगर आपका स्टार्टअप है, नोन कंडीशन टू द कॉन्ट्ररी स्टार्टअप है, तो आप ये सब कंपैरिजन नहीं कर सकते ना. देयर तो योर मोर फोकस विल बी ऑन एक्सपेंसेस ना, प्रॉफिट्स पे तो आप नहीं जा सकते ना. सो नोन कंडीशन टू द कॉन्ट्ररी. ठीक है. However, suitability of particular analytical procedure will depend upon auditor's assessment of how effective it will be in detecting a material misstatement. ठीक है. In some cases, unsophisticated. What is unsophisticated? Simple. What is predictive? You can say guessing. मॉडल में बी इफेक्टिव एज एनालिटिकल प्रोसीजर, है ना. किसी किसी केस में तो आप एज सिंपल एज दैट कि नंबर ऑफ एम्प्लॉइज मल्टीप्लाइड बाय द एम्प्लॉय सैलरी पर एम्प्लॉय. सो अनसोफिस्टिकेटेड सिंपल कैलकुलेशन से भी यू में obtain what your conclusion. ठीक है. So for example, the total rental income on building divided into apartments, taking the rental rates, the number of apartments, the vacancy rates into consideration, it can provide a persuasive is what? Convincing. It can provide convincing evidence and may eliminate the need of further verification by means of test of details. However, see students, what this paragraph is saying. See, let's say you are checking whether the rent income is coming correctly or not. So auditor may pick up the number of flats which are being given on rent multiplied by the rate of rent per flat, and he may take into account the flats that are vacant. Okay? And then he may decide that I'll not go for further checking. But tell me, when I have used one of the analytical procedure as ratio analysis, that GP ratio I have calculated. So is it possible that considering that GP ratio is correct, I may not check the entire P&L? Nahi. This conclusion that GP ratio is fine, जो मैंने develop किया था expectation उससे correct है, this only supports my other elements of P&L ना. पर उनको चेक तो करना पड़ेगा ना. तो corroboration is what? Supporting. So let us read this again. See, analytical procedures involving, for example, the prediction of total rent and income of a building. आप ये सब करते हो. It may eliminate the need for further verification by means of test of details. In contrast, calculation and comparison of gross margin percentages as a means of confirming a revenue figure may provide less persuasive audit evidence, but may provide useful corroboration, that is supportive evidence, if used in combination with other audit procedure. P&L item को तो check करोगे ना, सिर्फ GP ratio पे थोड़ी ना you will depend. Yes, if there is an unusual fluctuation, you may extend your audit procedure on the P&L item. समझ आता है? ठीक है. So this was about what? Suitability, and it further says that if controls over sales order processing are weak, for example, so if the risk of material misstatement, if you remember that we did, it depends upon risk of material misstatement. If risk of material misstatement is high, control risk is high, that is control is weak, auditor will place more reliance on test of details. Okay? And auditor may use a combination of both. For example, obtaining audit evidence regarding the valuation assertion for account receivable, auditor may apply analytical procedure for the aging of customer accounts in addition to performing test of details on subsequent cash receipts and collectability of receivables. Whether the trade receivables are collectible or not, whether they are good or bad, उसके लिए तो you will have to apply test of details ना. उसमें analytical procedure थोड़ी ना कर सकते हो. But yes, with respect to aging of customer accounts, you can perform the analytical procedure. So this was the topic. I'll summarize it, whereby we discussed that with respect to suitability of analytical procedure, auditor will first of all see it is applicable on what? Large volume of transactions which are predictable of time, where there is a relationship which continue to exist, and unless there are known conditions to the contrary. Now, whether to use analytical procedure or not, it depends upon auditor's judgment as to how effective will be an audit procedure. Sometimes unsophisticated predictive models, simple calculations may also help. For example, rent वाला example, that in that situation, auditor may decide कि ठीक है इतना reasonableness आ रहा है, it is a bearing in the P&L, I'll not check it in detail, test of detail नहीं करना है. But in contrast, for example, GP ratio, that is just a corroboration is what? Supporting, and persuasive is what? Convincing, है ना. तो GP ठीक आ रहा है, it is not as, it is less persuasive ना. उसके साथ कुछ और audit procedures भी तो करने पड़ेंगे ना in order to support the other audit evidence. ठीक है. information is comparable. For example, broad industry data, whether it is available or not, segments, whether information is available or not, nature and relevance of information. For example, nature and relevance of information. Try to understand this point. See, budgets are given by the management. Management ने budgets दिए आपको standard costing के लिए, and you have the actual results. Now, if these budgets are based on expectation rather than on goals to be achieved, so that is a correct situation. ना देखो, goals can always be aggressive. ना कि मेरे को 100 crore का turnover लेना है. But expectation is always what? Realistic. So the budget should be based on what? The expectation rather than the goals to be achieved. So that is why the nature and relevance of information. Okay? And last point, controls over the preparation of the information. If the controls over the preparation of information, and student, this word information includes both financial as well as non-financial data. If I'm using a data of what? Your number of employees. So I'll see now whether that information is also correct or not. Okay? So that is all covered by what? Reliability of data. You can just have a read. It is very simple. Now, evaluation of whether expectation is sufficiently precise. So in this step, auditor is first of all, he's developing an expectation and he's seeing as to whether that can be developed with precision, that is accuracy or not. है ना? अब accurately आप develop कर पाओगे या नहीं? Again, it will depend upon what? 3 factors. Which are what? That you have already done. I told you that you will find there is certain kind of repetition. अब यहाँ पर auditor has to see whether expectation can be developed. So first of all, he will see whether data is predictable or not. He will see whether data is disaggregated or not. He will see whether the data is available or not. These are same points, Hana, we have done. But when the auditor is deciding as to whether an expectation can be developed with precision, that is what? With accuracy, तो उसके लिए भी he'll see predictable है या नहीं, disaggregated है या नहीं, availability of data. And these are the same points I'm not repeating here. And the last point, amount of difference of recorded amounts from expected value that is acceptable. कि इतना है, जैसे I gave example of 500 rupees ना, कि इतना difference है तो that is acceptable. But beyond that मेरे को further investigation करना पड़ेगा. ठीक है? So auditor will consider that what is the acceptable difference. Okay? For example, auditors concluded that auditor decided that the GP ratio should be somewhere between 12 to let's say the auditor decided that GP ratio should be 11%. But if it is 10% or 12%, it is acceptable to me. Okay? But less than 10 or more than 12 is not acceptable. So the auditor determination of amount of difference from expectation can be accepted without further investigation, and it is influenced by materiality. Kitna material hai item. If it is more material, the difference will be less. Material item hai to less difference will be acceptable now, and the desired level of assurance. Agar zyada assurance chahiye, then again the difference will be less. Okay? And essay 330, it says the assessed risk. If the assessed risk increases, the amount of difference considered acceptable without investigation also decreases in order to achieve the desired level of persuasive evidence. See, this is just a repetition of whatever we have done so far in auditing. Now, just a minute. Okay? So amount of difference of recorded amount. So it basically says that what is the amount that is acceptable without further investigation, and it depends upon materiality, the desired level of assurance auditor wants. And if there is an increase in the assessed risk of material misstatement, obviously the auditor is going to reduce this difference, which is acceptable without investigation. So I hope till point number 7, the entire chapter is clear. And what we were discussing that when the auditor has decided that he's applying analytical procedure as substantive test, first of all, he'll determine the suitability of particular analytical procedure. He will evaluate the reliability of data. He'll develop an expectation, and he'll see whether an expectation can be developed which is sufficiently precise, and he'll determine the acceptable difference. Clear? Quickly send in your replies. See, I need to cover up the entire chapter. 3 topics are left, which are very simple, but yes, I will not increase my speed as such, but I need quick replies from your side. Quickly sending your replies. Send in your replies. Now, students, if you remember when we did the definition of SA 520, we saw that it is evaluation of financial information through analysis of plausible relationship among both financial and non-financial data. And the next line said that it also encompass investigation as is necessary. Okay? So the seventh topic that we did, seventh paragraph, was what is the amount of difference that is acceptable without investigation? कि अगर इतना difference है तो नहीं करना investigation. ठीक है? Now the next topic is what if the difference exceeds that limit? So itna to we know that the investigation here just means what? Detailed checking, further examination, performing more audit procedures here. ठीक है? So the next topic is what? Now what the auditor will do when there is a difference which requires further examination. So what is the topic? बहुत simple है. आप खुद सोचो क्या करोगे अगर ज्यादा difference है. So सबसे पहले किसको बोलोगे? Quickly tell me. Investigating results of analytical procedures. So if you remember this, just read this line again. This is the same from the definition. If analytical procedure performed in accordance with SA 520 identify fluctuations or relationships that are inconsistent with other relevant information or that differ from expected values by a significant amount, the auditor shall investigate the difference by क्या करोगे बताओ? सबसे पहले किसको बोलोगे? मैनेजमेंट, है ना? तो इंक्वायर मैनेजमेंट एंड बस मैनेजमेंट ने रिप्लाई कर दिया तो उस पर रिलाई कर लोगे? नो, यू विल अप्लाई प्रोफेशनल स्केप्टिसिज्म. मैनेजमेंट ने कुछ रिस्पॉन्स दिया है, यू विल ऑब्टेन एप्रोप्रिएट ऑडिट एविडेंस रेलेवेंट टू द मैनेजमेंट रिस्पॉन्स. गो बैक टू आवर एग्जांपल, 50,000 का रेंट था, अदर कंपनीज आर पेइंग 10,000, यू विल इंक्वायर मैनेजमेंट, है ना? यू 50,000 का रेंट था. When you compare it with the industry data, you thought कि ठीक है ज्यादा से ज्यादा 45,000 होगा, which is acceptable. But this 10,000 is not acceptable ना, है ना? तो you'll inquire management. मैनेजमेंट ने बोला कि देखो इन्होंने हमें बहुत सारी फैसिलिटीज दी हुई है, साउंड प्रूफ है, डस्ट प्रूफ है, प्लांटिंग है, एवरीथिंग इज देयर, वाईफाई है एंड मेनी अदर फैसिलिटीज, दैट इज व्हाई देयर इज इंक्रीज. ऐसे मान लोगे क्या? नहीं, यू विल ऑब्टेन ऑडिट एविडेंस relevant to the management response. Suppose this is the first point, and second point is what? Suppose when you inquire management say, I don't know, the facts are in front of you, you can yourself analyze. So if management is unable to provide an explanation, or when you obtain, you are not able to obtain appropriate audit evidence with respect to what? The management response, you will perform other audit procedure as is necessary, है ना? So whatever auditor will again apply what? His professional judgment, and accordingly he'll perform the other audit procedures. ठीक है? कब? जब ऊपर में से दोनों बातें नहीं हुई, मैनेजमेंट ने रिस्पॉन्स नहीं दिया या जो रिस्पॉन्स दिया, you are not able to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence with respect to that. सिंपल है, बहुत सिंपल है. अदर ऑडिट प्रोसीजर मीन्स अब आप उसको डिटेल में चेक करोगे ना. आपने एनालिटिकल प्रोसीजर लगाया कि 50,000 था, इंडस्ट्री का 10,000 था. यू आस्क द मैनेजमेंट ने क्या बोला कि यार आपके पास सब पेपर्स हैं, आप चेक कर लो ना. तो आपने अदर ऑडिट प्रोसीजर्स किए. यू आस्क द मैनेजमेंट टू गिव यू रेंट अग्रीमेंट, यू आस्क द मैनेजमेंट टू गिव यू द एड्रेस ऑफ द लैंडलॉर्ड, है ना? You send an external confirmation to the landlord. So other procedures, you will extend your audit procedures. ठीक है? Whose query was it? Inquiring of management is discussing with management. Prathul, you must have done chapter number 3 now, whereby all the audit procedures were discussed in detail. ठीक है? So I hope your doubt is clear. हाँ, Prathul, by performing other audit procedure. What performing other audit procedure means, है ना? So analytical procedure से नहीं समझ आया, मैनेजमेंट कह रहा है मेरे को नहीं पता, you have all the papers, so you will check all those papers in detail. You may ask for external confirmation के लिए एड्रेस मांग लोगे. ठीक है? Now the next topic, which is what? Just a minute. This sheet is hanged now. Just a minute. It is also tired. Wait. But only 2 topics are left which are important. Just a minute. ठीक है? So we were doing what? The last 2 topics. Simple है. Investigation very simple. अगर 3 मार्क डायरेक्ट क्वेश्चन आ जाता है तो इट इज अ बोनस क्वेश्चन फॉर यू. बहुत सिंपल है. मैनेजमेंट से इंक्वायर करो, सफिशिएंट एप्रोप्रिएट एविडेंस लो इन रिस्पॉन्स टू मैनेजमेंट, इन रेलेवेंट टू मैनेजमेंट रिस्पॉन्स. दोनों में से कुछ नहीं होता तो अदर ऑडिट प्रोसीजर्स कर लो. कंसीडर द इफेक्ट एज इज नेसेसरी. अगर आपको फिर भी कुछ भी नहीं मिला है तो ठीक है, रिपोर्ट करना है तो ऑडिट रिपोर्ट में रिपोर्ट कर दो, बट एज इज नेसेसरी इन द सर्कमस्टांसेस. ठीक है. नाउ एनालिटिकल प्रोसीजर, दैट analytical procedure that assist when forming an overall conclusion. तो सबसे पहले तो just see, students may note that analytical procedure assisting for forming overall conclusion will be discussed in detail at final level. तो यहाँ पर क्या लिखा हुआ है? So it basically says that, so auditor will, when he is forming an overall conclusion on the financial statements, ठीक है, he will see whether the expectation that he developed, it is matching with what? The actual results. ठीक है. And if you remember students, I gave you what? An example कि अगर GP ratio correct है, इसका मतलब ये नहीं है that all the elements of P&L are correct and there is no need to check them. है ना? So see what is mentioned. The conclusions draw from results of analytical procedures designed and performed in accordance with are intended to corroborate. Corroborate is what? Support conclusions formed during the audit of individual components of elements of financial statement P&L का, जो all the items are there, GP ratio correct आ रहा है as per management expectation. It means कि ठीक है, but it is supporting the evidence that rest of the items are also correct. So you cannot say कि GP ratio ठीक है तो I will not check. This result of analytical procedure, it corroborates. It supports the conclusions formed during the audit of individual components. That assists the auditor to draw a reasonable conclusion on which to base the auditor's opinion. And the results of analytical procedure may identify previously unrecognized risk of material misstatement. And in essay 315, you have seen that auditor can always revise his risk of material misstatement if he identifies certain fluctuations. Okay? So, as such in detail, you will be doing in chapter number in finance. Okay? So, I hope it is clear. So, basically, it's saying it corroborates the other conclusions, and then the auditor is able to draw a reasonable conclusion on the financial statement as a whole. And if as a result of analytical procedure, auditor assesses that there is some fluctuation, he may revise his assessment of risk of material misstatement. Clear? So Karthik is saying, ma'am, running at 1.25 पर मजा आ रहा है, एक बुक खत्म होने वाली है. Understood till now. चलो good. So the last 4 minutes and this topic, and then I'll definitely revise and the entire chapter. And students, that revision is definitely going to help you. So please, I'll be needing the next 15 minutes. That's it. And then this entire chapter is going to be crystal clear to all of you. ठीक है? अब देखो, consideration specific to public sector entities. So now the topic is that with respect to public sector entities, can the auditor apply analytical procedure? So the answer is yes, auditor can very well apply. But the way of apply may be different vis-a-vis the way when the auditor applies analytical procedures to a profit-making organization. The term used is what? Traditional organization. That is those which are engaged in the business of profit generating vis-a-vis the public sector entities. Fine. See students, first of all, with respect to public sector entities, let's take example of Indian Railways. The tickets that are being sold are sold at 75% subsidized rate. So can you say that there is a little direct relationship between the sales and expenditure in case of public sector entities? I'll give you an example. when there is a recession in the economy, with respect to public sector entities, there are no retrenchments. In fact, they keep on hiring the employees. निकालते नहीं है किसी को भी. But with respect to private, there are a number of retrenchment. Retrenchment is what? कि निकाल देते हैं employees को because recession है. Why? Because public sector में the motive is not to earn the profit, but it is what? Public welfare also. So there is a decrease in the revenue, but the expenditure is increasing. Indian Railways, it is providing the tickets at subsidized rate, 75% pay, but revenue is not increasing much, but there is a increase in the expenditure. So there is little direct relationship between revenue and expenditure. Why? Because the purpose of public sector entity is not as such to generate profit, but to make provision for public welfare. ठीक है. Further, let's say there is acquisition of, let's say, some cranes or some hoardings or something like that has been purchased, and those are installed where in the, let's say, the streets, है ना. Let's say बेटी पढ़ाओ बेटी बचाओ. For that there are some hoardings that are installed. So expenditure is there, but as such there is no revenue now. Hana? Further, with respect to the public sector entities like your Indian Railways, it is possible that since it is a monopoly, the comparable data is not available. So in that case, analytical procedure, the way it is applied for profit-making entity, the same way it cannot be applied. Then how can analytical procedures be applied? So there are examples that are given as to how the auditor may apply analytical procedure. So see, however, other relationships may be relevant. For example, variations in cost per kilometer of road construction or the number of vehicles acquired compared with number of vehicles retired. For example, with respect to public transport. So last year, this number of vehicles were newly acquired and this number of vehicles were scrapped off or they were retired. This year, this is the number. So such kind of comparisons can be made. The cost per kilometer of road construction was this last year and this year it is itna. So such kind of comparisons can be made. But since there is a little direct relationship between the revenue and expenditure, why? Because the purpose is what? Public welfare. Subsidized rates are provided. The comparable data may not be available. So the way of applying analytical procedure in case of public sector entities might change. Okay? So is it clear? Is it clear? So with this, we have finished the entire chapter, though the speed was a little fast today. Why? Because I had only one session for this chapter. So we will quickly revise and you will see how in 10 minutes we'll be able to revise. And now how to learn? Pick up the keywords, use your connecting language, learn the definitions. देखो definition learn करोगे ना तो the technical language, the words that you have learned in the definition ना, just see this definition of analytical procedure. So this is the definition, Hana. These how many lines? 7 lines. This is used in this entire chapter a number of times. You may use this definition again and again in your answers. Hana. जैसे investigation है, वहां पर भी same line आता है ना. Analytical procedures क्या होता है? Definition आता है, concept आता है, कहीं पर भी you can use these definitions now. And now you know that these words are to be used. These are the technical words. So I'm sure that once you have learned the definition, as here Rajesh Salteva sir has asked you, you will be able to, you automatically get the keywords. You will be able to learn the keywords with ease. Okay? So now let us quickly start. So here we started by saying that routine checks say all misstatements cannot be, you cannot check all the misstatements. So uske liye kya karna hai? Some other tests that are called overall tests like comparison, trend, ratio, reasonableness. Dekho, ab to you are aware about all these 4 items. Na? Okay? So what is meaning? It is given by SF 520 which says C, evaluation of financial information. Keep that salary wala example in your mind. Through analysis of plausible relationship among both financial and non-financial data. फिर कोई fluctuation होता है उसको ignore करना है नहीं. Analytical procedure also encompass is what? Include such investigation as is necessary of identified fluctuation or relationship that are inconsistent with other relevant information or that differ from expected values of significant amount. ठीक है? It includes comparison of entities' financial information or consideration of relationship and other procedure. Other procedures में क्या आ गया? Now I am able to write. तो investigation के लिए भी तो आप further inquiry कर रहे हो management से or you whatever you are doing. ठीक है? Example of analytical procedures are what? Comparing with what? Prior period data with the anticipated results, and now you know the expectation can be developed by auditor or by management, and similar industry information or the industry averages. And what all relationship is it? Only financial and non-financial information? Nahi, wo to hai hi. We have done it in the definition, but also among the elements of financial information. And it may be done through simple comparisons or complex analysis. I hope this doubt is now clear for all those who were asking. And it can be used for consolidated financial statement पर भी आप apply कर सकते हो और individual elements of information like wages and sales का comparison. So individual elements, ठीक है? Scope. So I have asked you to read this first. The use of analytical procedure as risk assessment procedure is dealt in SA 315. SA 330 includes requirements and guidance regarding NT of other audit procedure in response to assessed risk. तो पहले तो क्या बताया कि SA 330 क्या बताता है? These audit procedure may include substantive analytical procedures. कहाँ पर देखें? SA 520 में देखो. If you are using them as what? देखो. SA 520 deals with auditors' use of analytical procedure as substantive procedure. So here it will be known as substantive analytical procedure and as procedure near the audit that assists the auditor when forming an overall conclusion. ठीक है? तो objective क्या है? तो risk assessment procedure तो इधर आएगा नहीं. बाकी दोनों आएंगे. That is to obtain reliable, relevant audit evidence and to design, perform analytical procedure near the end of audit that assists the auditor when forming an overall conclusion as to whether the financial statements are consistent with auditor's understanding of the entity or not. Purpose क्या है? So the purpose is what? First of all, first line explains that analytical procedures में क्या आता है? Comparisons and relationships आते हैं. Why? To assess whether account balance is reasonable or not. ठीक है? So balance sheet item में और the P&L में you can compare it with the previous year. So इससे help क्या होता है? It help you to detect something unusual state of affairs. ठीक है? Then these examples you can read. It may be interfirm, it may be what? Intrafirm. For example, that you are comparing the P&L items with respect to the other industry or the prior period. ठीक है? You may compare the balances of statement of P&L. अच्छा, here it has been talked about what? Other industry. यहाँ पे previous year की बात कर रहे हैं. Ratio of certain expenses with respect to sales can be calculated compared with the previous year. And if it is material, then auditor can see whether this is done intentionally to inflate or suppress the profits. ठीक है? And there may be what? Indication of what? Fraud. So it is basically, I told you that attention directing process. टाइमिंग क्या है? एक्सपीरियंस ऑडिटर इसको यूज करेगा प्लानिंग में भी, टेस्टिंग में भी, कंप्लीशन में भी. प्लानिंग में कैसे यूज होता है? So when the auditor is obtaining an understanding of the client business, he will assess as to identify the areas of potential risk. He will decide the nature, timing, extent of other procedures, and he will use both the financial and the non-financial data. I gave you example of wages कि all of a sudden 30% increase है तो dummy workman तो नहीं है. So he may decide the nature, timing, extent of the audit procedures with respect to specific account balances. Now, substantive analytical procedures apply करना है या नहीं depends upon what? Various factors like whether data is available, disaggregation. So basically, this point is also covered in availability of data Karthik. But basically, it is saying कि data जो है जितना bifurcated होगा उतना analysis आप अच्छे से कर सकते हो ना. So disaggregation, that is segregation, difference, the data which has been bifurcated is more helpful in applying the analytical procedures. Account type income statement hai, to there you can apply it with ease. Balance sheet में I told you that relationship आप consider कर सकते हो, ठीक है? Source, the data which is the routine kind of transactions, your purchases, sales, है ना? So you are in a better position to apply analytical procedure there vis-a-vis significant classes of transaction like your research and development, advertisement expenditure. There, though, you will have to apply what? Test of details. Predictability, data which are more predictable. There is a relationship which continue to exist. है ना? So there, applying the analytical procedure are more useful. Nature of assertion, rights and obligations, you cannot apply analytical procedure. But yes, with respect to measurement, with respect to other assertions like your value measurement or completeness, the auditor is in a better position to apply the analytical procedure. Inherent risk. If the inherent risk is high, the auditor will not only rely on analytical procedure, he will go for what? Test of details. What are the techniques? Trend analysis, ratio analysis, reasonableness test, structural modeling. Trend analysis, as the name suggests, prior period item may be of a particular period or a number of periods, है ना? And change है तो there is no problem. But what are the factors, है ना? Unusual change तो नहीं है. For example, we took example of salary कि dummy workman तो नहीं है. रेशियो एनालिसिस बैलेंस शीट आइटम पे भी हो सकता है, पीएनएल आइटम पे भी हो सकता है. रिलेशनशिप प्रेडिक्ट करोगे बैलेंस शीट आइटम में आप इन रिलेशनशिप जैसे ट्रेड रिसीवेबल इन रिलेशन टू व्हाट सेल्स यू विल कंसीडर. यू मे कंपेयर इट ओवर टाइम विद सेम इंडस्ट्री और सेपरेट एंटिटीज इन द ग्रुप. स्टूडेंट्स, टेल मी, इज दिस रिवीजन हेल्पिंग यू? आई नीडेड जस्ट 15 minutes extra from you. So reasonableness test. So unlike trend analysis, here we are not using prior period data, but we are using non-financial data. है ना? For example, income statement में. So these are the various examples that 5% interest rate, है ना? Or raw material consumption to quantity you are taking, rental revenue you are taking, structural modeling, a modeling tool. So this is a statistical model using financial and non-financial data of prior accounting period so that you can predict the current year balances. Example, linear regression. When the auditor has decided to use analytical procedure as substantive procedure, first of all, auditor will determine whether a particular substantive analytical procedure is suitable. He will see the assertion he is checking, the risk of material misstatement, and test of details. When the auditor is using what? So student is saying, ma'am, yes, proceed further. Chalo, good. So reliability of data he'll see, and whether development of an expectation sufficiently precise is possible or not, and he'll determine the amount of any difference of recorded from expected values that is acceptable without difference. Now, first point, suitability of particular analytical procedures. Dekho, for all those who are saying, ma'am, how to learn? See, abhi, what I'm doing, I'm just telling you the keywords. Na? Baki to I'm using my connecting language, na? My connecting words. So let's see, agar suitability pe aata hai, to what you will write. So using analytical procedure is more applicable कहाँ पर? जहाँ huge volume of transaction which are predictable over time. ठीक है? Unless so continue the relationship should continue to exist unless there are no condition to the contrary. And suitability will depend upon how effective is it in detecting material misstatement. Sometimes unsophisticated predictive model may be effective. Sometimes, for example, what? When the example of rental rates, Hana, that auditor may determine what is the rent income by simply taking the rent per flat, the occupancy rate, and the vacant rate. Okay? But when the auditor is calculating the GP ratio, then that is providing a corroborative audit evidence. Auditor will have to perform the other audit evidence on the P&L items. Now, if the internal control over sales order processing are weak, auditor may put more reliance on the test of details rather than only the substantive analytical procedure. Auditor may use a combination of substantive analytical procedure and test of detail. For example, with respect to the trade receivables, auditor may apply analytical procedures to the aging of customer balances. However, in order to check the recoverability or collectability of the receivables, he will have to apply what? The test of details. Okay? Reliability of data. So the auditor, when he's applying analytical procedure, he will see the reliability of data. There are 4 factors: source of information, comparability, nature and relevance, control over preparation of information. Source of information external is more reliable. Comparability of information, he'll see whether the data is comparable or not. Nature and relevance, maybe we saw an example of budget. So budget should be based on expectation rather than the goals to be achieved. Okay? Controls over the preparation of information, auditor will see over the C. This you have already done in your chapter number 3 now. That completeness hai, accuracy hai, validity hai ya nahi, hai na? And he'll see this with respect to financial as well as non-financial data. So dekho, the operating effectiveness of controls over non-financial information may often be used in conjunction with other tests of control. Evaluation. So auditor will see whether he will develop an expectation here, and he'll see whether an expectation which is sufficiently precise can be developed or not. And it depends upon various factors, which are the accuracy with which expected results of substantive analytical procedures can be predicted. Now, you all know the example कि gross profit margins को आप predict कर सकते हो, लेकिन research and advertisement को नहीं कर सकते. So you can write that in your language now. The data to which this is disaggregated. Substantive analytical procedure may be more effective when applied to financial information on individual sections of an operation or to financial statements or components of diversified entity than when applied to the entity as a whole. A segment-wise information here. So it is better to apply the analytical procedure on each segment rather than to the totality of the data, rather than to total of revenue and expenses. Availability of both financial and non-financial data. Okay? Then amount of difference that is acceptable. So auditor will determine as to what amount of difference from the recorded amount and the expected value is acceptable without further investigation, and it depends upon the materiality and this desired level of assurance. As SA 330 requires the auditor to obtain more persuasive audit evidence, the higher the auditor's assessment of risk. So if there is an increase in the assessed risk of material misstatement, auditor will reduce the amount of difference that is acceptable without further investigation. Investigation में क्या करना है? Keywords: inquire management, obtain audit evidence relevant to responses. If auditor is management is unable to provide an explanation, or the explanation together with audit evidence obtained relevant to management response is not considered adequate, so auditor will perform the other audit procedure as is necessary. Overall conclusion, maybe I've seen that the conclusions from analytical procedure, they are intended to corroborate conclusions formed during the audit of individual components or elements of the financial statement. See, अब क्या है? Audit हो चुका है. Now auditor is performing what? Again the analytical procedure when he is drawing overall conclusion. अब GP ratio correct आता है तो auditor will be satisfied ना. He will have confidence on all the items of P&L, है ना, कि मैंने जो checking किया था वो सही है because the GP is coming as I expected. Now take a situation where he checked all the items of the P&L and they were all correct as per his calculations and everything. Now, when he's checking the GP ratio, according to his expectation, it should be 10%, and the actually is coming at 15%. Hana? So it is not supporting his conclusion now with respect to individual components. So this is what is meant by this paragraph. Consideration specific to public sector mein. Achha, we have not read it from the module. So see, the relationship between individual financial statements traditionally is what? Profit making entities considered in the audit of business entities may not always be relevant in the government or other non-business public sectors. Why? Because public sector entities there may be little direct relationship between revenue and expenditure. In addition, expenditure on the acquisition of assets may not be capitalized. आपने होर्डिंग लगा दिया ना, it may not be capitalized, but there may be no relationship between expenditures. For example, inventories of fixed assets or the amount of those assets reported in the financial statements. ठीक है? Also, industry data or statistics for comparative purposes may not be available in the public sector. However, other relationships may be relevant. For example, variation in cost per kilometer of road construction or number of vehicles acquired compared with the vehicles retired. So with this, we have finished our chapter number 8. Okay? So I hope it is clear to all of you, and I also hope that this revision has helped all of you. So students, I hope if you go through, I'm sure that if you go through the module once or twice after the session itself, and start learning the definition and like picking up the keywords, just remember the examples that I've given you when you are trying to learn the definition. The entire chapter is going to be clear to you. So hoping that this revision has helped you. hoping that you have understood, expecting that you will go through the module. So I end this session for today. Please send in your replies whether you have understood or not, and we will meet in the next whenever my next chapter will come. Okay? So till that time, have a happy learning and start learning. Happy learning कब आएगा? जब start करोगे ना. So start learning, right? So thank you for being a patient listener and giving me extra 18 minutes. Okay? Thank you so much and good night.